Chapter 196. Ning Chen was shocked. He put away the gold notes in embarrassment. He had thought that he was rich, but he was still poor in front of the shopkeeper. He had given 2/3 of the money from the auction of the 9 Wonders separation flower to Zhang Sun, and the remaining 1/3 was left in the Marquis manor. The last time he had returned, he had taken out a portion. After paying for the building, he still had some left. It seemed that the pills the shopkeeper had given him were truly extraordinary. Ning Chen casually took out a pill and threw it into the corner of his mouth. Immediately, a gentle medicinal power spread out and entered his body. "I can't thank you enough." Ning Chen didn't know if it was useful or not, so he stood up and bowed. "No need to thank me. Live a few more days and repay your debt," the shopkeeper said. Ning Chen smiled. "I'll try my best." "All right, you can leave. I know you have a lot of things to do, so I won't keep you." The shopkeeper sent him off. "Shopkeeper understands me. See you later." Ning Chen smiled. "See you later." The shopkeeper's expression was calm, but he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He hoped that they would meet again someday. Ning Chen left without stopping. He directly headed north toward Marquis Bloodclad's camp. Recently, the fighting between Northern Meng and Grand Xia had decreased, and it had calmed down. This made him even more worried. In Marquis Bloodclad's camp, a ghost palanquin arrived. When the guards in front of the commander's tent saw Ning Chen, they respectfully bowed and made way. Ning Chen entered the commander's tent. There was only Marquis Bloodclad inside. Marquis Bloodclad wasn't surprised. He had already expected Ning Chen to come. As a martial Marquis of Grand Xia, how could he not know what kind of sacrifice was behind this responsibility? "How is the battle situation?" "It's not good." The two of them had a tacit understanding not to mention Donglin City and Marquis Bloodclad. They directly changed the topic to the most important battle. "Come over and take a look," Marquis Bloodclad said. Ning Chen walked over and looked at where Marquis Bloodclad was pointing. He frowned. "Shaoling Ancient Town." "Yes, that's right. Northern Meng's army's current target is this place." "Have the commoners all moved away?" Ning Chen asked. "Almost all of them," the Marquis replied. "It's indeed a bit troublesome. Shaoling Ancient Town was a very big place, but the defense was very weak. It could not resist the iron hooves of the Northern Meng army. It was only a matter of time before Shaoling was taken. There was no suspense. The main problem is still Northern Meng's light and heavy cavalry. They are too difficult to deal with," the Marquis said with a sigh. Heavy cavalry was invincible against 10,000 men. This was an unchanging law. Northern Meng had nearly 10,000 heavy cavalry. With them as the vanguard and a large number of light cavalry who were good at riding and shooting, they were the symbol of invincibility. We still need more training to deal with the 30,000 heavy cavalry. However, we should be able to do so soon. Try to delay the Northern Meng army for as long as possible, Ning Chen suggested. The Marquis nodded and said, "Jing Wu Duke will be here soon. Together with the 55,000 Imperial Guards under my command, we should be able to buy some time. If the cavalry wanted to leave, no one would be able to stop them." However, the Northern Meng military advisor had always tried his best to avoid a head-on confrontation. As long as it was not a good opportunity, he would not easily mobilize his troops. At this point in the war, both sides were clear about their opponent's situation. There were no secrets. Whoever could create the best opportunity and seize it would be the winner. "There is one more thing that you might be more concerned about," the Marquis suddenly thought of something and said seriously. "In the Northern Meng imperial court, the news of the young emperor taking an empress has already spread like wildfire. However, the candidate for the empress has not been announced yet." Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He knew about this, but he still did not understand what Fan Lingyue was doing. So many days had passed since he sent her the letter, and there was no news. He guessed that there would not be a reply. If he went to Northern Meng, with Fan Lingyue's style, he would definitely not return. Of course, there was another possibility. Fan Lingyue had asked Mingyu to take an empress, but Mingyu was unwilling. Therefore, she used him as a shield. Fan Lingyue was just passing this problem to him. If that was the case, Mingyu would really have given him and Fan Lingyue a headache. The little girl had grown up and become smarter. Although he and Fan Lingyue were at loggerheads, they both cared about Mingyu. If possible, neither of them wanted to disappoint the little girl too much. For experts close to the Xiantian realm, it would only take 1 or 2 days to travel between northern Meng and Grand Xia. During Mingyu's wedding, Fan Lingyue would most likely have to go back. If both of them were present at the same time, it would be very troublesome. The more Ningchen thought about it, the more his head hurt. It was not easy to find a foolproof plan. Marquis, there is a letter from the Imperial Palace, a respectful voice reported from outside the tent. Send it in, the Marquis said. As soon as he finished speaking, a green-armored soldier came in. After delivering the letter, he quickly retreated. The Marquis picked up the letter and opened it. There were 2 letters inside. This one is for you, the Marquis said as he handed over one of the letters. Ningchen took it. The more he read, the tighter his frown became. What he was afraid of had happened. What's wrong? The Marquis asked. The remnants of the Wang family were rescued by the people of Desolate City, Ningchen said as he handed the letter back. The Marquis took the letter. After reading it, his expression turned ugly. This result was indeed disappointing. In Grand Xia, the remnants of the Wang family were unknown. If at the critical moment, they worked together to stab Grand Xia, it would be really troublesome. It's all for naught. Ningchen felt somewhat helpless. How could he not expect that there would be problems at Heaven's Gate? Now that the Wang family's power had completely turned from the light to the dark, it would be even more difficult to deal with them. It's always useful. At least the Wang family has suffered such a huge loss. They won't do anything for a while, the Marquis comforted. Since things have come to this, we can only stabilize the war here and try not to give the Wang family any chance, Ningchen sighed softly and said. In fact, this rescue of the remnants of the Wang family not only planted a hidden danger for Grand Xia, but also exposed a problem. Grand Xia's peak combat power was at a disadvantage. The 2 disciples of Sword City were obviously far stronger than ordinary peak rank 9 experts. With Fan Lingyue, even Xiantian experts might not be able to take advantage of them. For thousands of years, Grand Xia had been producing countless experts. Unexpectedly, at this time, Grand Xia was at a disadvantage compared to the peak experts. The current situation for Grand Xia was becoming more and more unfavorable. In the following time, the 2 continued to discuss the situation of the war. Before dawn, Ningchen left. There were still a few days before the official battle between the Northern Meng army and Grand Xia. He couldn't wait forever. At least he took this opportunity to find the whereabouts of the red spider lilies. The next night, Ningchen left the underworld in the ghost palanquin at a fast speed all the way north. Compared to the endless easternmost land, the easternmost mountain was more reliable. The ghost palanquin was extremely fast and soon arrived at Heaven's Gate. Yang Hong was guarding it. Ningchen didn't want to force his way in and still chose to pass through the Qizhou Mountains. He shouldn't be so unlucky as to encounter Tao Tai eating every time. As for other dangers, he could still manage. The ghost palanquin sped. This time, it was very smooth. It didn't encounter any strange birds or monsters and quickly passed through the mountains. After passing through the Qizhou Mountains, the ghost palanquin moved faster and faster. It turned into a black ray of light and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the ghost palanquin, Ning Chen's expression was solemn. Northern Meng's easternmost mountain wasn't much better than the Qizhou Mountains of Great Xia. It was the most primitive land in the world. It wasn't strange for all kinds of things to appear there. In this world, there were martial artists and Xiantian experts. They were monsters that couldn't be killed by human strength. He didn't doubt that in these primitive lands, something that he couldn't understand might appear again one day. As the ghost palanquin moved north, the easternmost mountain was getting closer. Ning Chen avoided human habitation and tried his best to move through the wilderness. After passing through the Beijiang Plains, the ghost palanquin changed direction and rushed towards the northwest. Soon, a huge peak appeared in front of him. The surrounding peaks of various sizes were faintly discernible. It stretched along the northwest direction and the end couldn't be seen. They had arrived at the easternmost mountain. The ghost palanquin drove directly into it, but its speed was greatly reduced. Ning Chen didn't know what dangers were waiting for him. It was better to be safe than sorry. The black and white impermanence, Oxhead and Horseface appeared in front of and behind the palanquin. They brought along a ghostly aura that filled the sky. In the palanquin, Ning Chen took out a bottle of medicinal pills, poured out a handful and swallowed them. The shopkeeper was right. His current situation couldn't get any worse. He could only try everything he could. No matter if these pills were useful or not, he had to try. He wouldn't die no matter how much he ate. The medicinal power spread out and quickly entered his internal organs, limbs and bones. Soon, it disappeared without a trace. He didn't know if it was because it was useless or the effect wasn't obvious. He didn't feel it. The black and white impermanence led the way while Oxhead and Horseface carried the palanquin. They kept moving forward. Ning Chen rarely summoned these four weapon spirits of the ghost palanquin. To ordinary 9th stage experts, the illusory black and white impermanence and the invulnerable Oxhead and Horseface might be difficult to deal with. But to Fan Lingyue or Underworld Child, these four weapon spirits were almost no threat to them. The reason why the ghost palanquin was indestructible was because of the existence of these four weapon spirits. If it was destroyed in a battle, the losses would outweigh the gains. Rumble. Suddenly, the earth trembled and approached rapidly from afar. Inside the ghost palanquin, Ning Chen's expression immediately became interesting. Beast tide. The ghost palanquin immediately sped up, avoiding the direction of the beast tide and swept to the side. A moment later, a large black mass of beasts stepped over the mountain and disappeared into the distance. The beast tide came quickly and left quickly as well. It was over in a few breaths of time, leaving behind only a desolation of devastation. Ning Chen didn't know how to express his feelings. Fortunately, it was just a beast tide. Compared to those unimaginable monsters in the Chizhou mountain range, this place was much more normal. Ning Chen collected his thoughts and continued forward. Above the 9th heaven, the bright moon moved westward. The night gradually deepened. The ghost palanquin went deeper and deeper. Soon, it was buried in the mountain range of ancient trees. Chapter 197. On Dredge Mountain, the ghost palanquin advanced. Sinister ghost qi continued to spread, causing many poisonous insects and beasts to stay away. There were no roads in the primitive lands. The black and white impermanence led the way, while Oxhead and Horseface followed closely behind. Dredge Mountain was continuous. The ghost palanquin passed through mountain after mountain, going deeper and deeper. Not long after, a turbulent river appeared in front of them. The waves reached the sky, cutting off the path ahead. Ning Chen did not get down from the palanquin. Instead, he continued forward. The black and white impermanence, Oxhead, and Horseface walked on the waves, heading toward the opposite shore. At this moment, an accident finally occurred on their journey that had been quite smooth. Amidst a sharp whistling sound, a huge wave that was over 30 meters tall surged up and smashed down with a loud bang. Under the terrifying might of heaven, the ghost palanquin was as insignificant as an ant. It was immediately swallowed up by the huge wave, its shadow nowhere to be seen. The next moment, a blurry, translucent figure appeared in the river. The sharp whistle pierced one's eardrums. A water demon? This world really is full of strange things. Under the huge wave, the ghost palanquin disappeared without a trace. Only Ning Chen stood on the water, his expression shocked. A large river was not weak water. Otherwise, even a peak rank 9 expert would not be able to borrow its strength. This was just an ordinary river, but it had given birth to a spirit like a water demon. This was clearly unusual. The water demon had already taken human form. It was female, but its facial features had yet to fully take shape. It was slightly blurry. All things had spirits. This water demon had clearly just gained intelligence. Its sharp whistle was both fearful and warning. Without a doubt, the ghost palanquin's crossing of the river had alerted the water demon. "I have no ill intentions. I'm just crossing the river," said Ning Chen as calmly as he could. "Ah!" The sharp whistle still carried a strong sense of vigilance. Beside the water demon, waves surged, as if it would punish the intruder at any moment. Ning Chen frowned slightly. Not being able to understand human speech and communicate was not a good thing. He was in a hurry and could not waste too much time here. He could only force his way through. Strands of true qi circulated around his body. This time, the pain seemed to be less than before. It seemed that the pills he had swallowed had more or less alleviated the pain. Ning Chen walked forward step by step. Following that, the water demon's whistle became more and more frequent. The sense of warning grew stronger and stronger. Finally, the water demon let out a sharp whistle and attacked first. The river water churned as a huge wave rose up and smashed down. First defense shocking waves splitting 10,000 li. Ning Chen used the triple success body and condensed qi with his sword finger. As the waves surged, the river water gathered rapidly and formed a huge sword. In a flash, the sword slashed down and broke the huge waves. Between the two of them, or perhaps it should be said that the difference in strength between a human and a demon was too great. The huge wave was split apart by the sword and scattered in all directions. The water demon was frightened. Her exquisite, transparent body kept shaking. Apparently, she was scared. "Get out of the way. You're not my match." Ning Chen's tone was still calm, without any malice. However, what surprised everyone was that even though the water demon's body was shaking uncontrollably, it still stood in front of Ling Xian and refused to step back. Ning Chen's brows furrowed even tighter. Something wasn't right. Even if these elves and monsters didn't understand the human language, they should have the instinct to seek fortune and avoid calamity. They shouldn't act so recklessly. He still had to walk this path on his way back. If the water demon insisted on blocking him, it would waste quite a bit of his time. Ning Chen wasn't too willing to kill this kind of monster. Among all living things, there were far too few that could awaken intelligence. Furthermore, it would take countless years to do so. Killing one meant there would be one less. With a flip of his hand, an ancient mirror appeared. Ning Chen activated the life scroll and the ancient mirror immediately awakened. A faint light shone down on the water demon's body. The water demon was startled and fiercely struggled. However, it was all in vain. The light blue mirror was like a cage that firmly locked her in place. A moment later, Ning Chen crossed the river, leaving behind the ancient mirror to lock down the water demon's body. He continued forward. This was the mirror he had taken from the ancient sage's tomb. He had pondered over it for a long time but hadn't been able to figure out how to use it. Right now, the power he could use was just barely enough to trap the water demon. He didn't know whether it was because he hadn't found a way to use it or because the mirror didn't approve of him. In any case, this broken mirror's use was far less frightening than its origin. He crossed mountain after mountain. Time slowly passed, but Ning Chen still hadn't found any trace of Ruo Shui. It was getting late, and it would take some time to return. Ning Chen decisively decided to return first and come back tomorrow. Wah, wah. However, just at this moment, a tender baby's cry rang out from the depths of Alienation Mountain. It was heart-wrenching. Ning Chen's eyelids twitched. A chill rose in his heart. A moment later, he hastily retreated. However, he was still a step too late. Fog filled the world, trapping everything within dozens of miles. It formed a huge fog forest. Ning Chen's expression immediately became grave. This was troublesome. The fog was so dense that one couldn't even see their own fingers. It was hard to tell which direction to go. Wah! The baby's cry was getting closer and closer. It didn't take long for it to be right in front of him. Ning Chen unsheathed his ink sword, and frost condensed. He stood in the fog without moving a single step, waiting for the unknown enemy to arrive. This time, he really might have encountered a monster. Hopefully, he could still make it back in time. Swoosh! Suddenly, the mist 300 meters away stirred intensely and condensed into form. After that, it transformed into a water arrow that silently shot forward. Ning Chen only felt a chill on his back. He subconsciously tilted his body. He saw the water arrow brush past his sleeve and quickly disappear into the distance. In the next moment, the fog condensed again, and water arrows shot out one after another. Ning Chen waited with full concentration. As his feet moved, his plain clothes fluttered as if they were dancing. He dodged the water arrows that came from all directions. An unknown enemy with an unknown ability. Ning Chen couldn't find a clue. He could only deal with the situation by remaining unchanged and wait for the enemy to appear. It would be difficult to kill him with just these water arrows. After a while, the enemy in the dark might have also discovered this problem. They stopped wasting their energy and calmed down. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. He spread out his spiritual sense, trying to find the enemy's position. Wah! At this moment, a baby's cry rang in his ears. Immediately, a huge mouth appeared and tried to swallow him. Ning Chen's body moved, and he moved 10 feet away. With a wave of his left hand, he dispersed the fog around him. The monster that appeared in front of him had the body of a snake and the head of a human. It had the face of a baby, and it kept crying. It made one's hair stand on end. Ning Chen quickly tried to figure out the monster's identity. After a while, his body trembled and he was shocked. Nine-headed snakelet. The legendary monster of water and fire. It could spit out water and fire. It had 9 heads, the face of a baby, and it cried. Therefore, it was called nine-headed snakelet. There were many legends in the world. Only nine-headed snakelet could match the monster in front of him. However, this monster seemed to only have 1 head. Or perhaps, only this head came out to hunt. No matter what, 1 head was much easier to deal with than 9 heads. The legendary nine-headed snakelet was a ferocious beast that could be compared to Tao Tai. It was extremely terrifying. With his ability, even if he was at his peak, he wouldn't be a match for such a ferocious beast. Once he encountered it, he wouldn't even have the chance to escape. Previously, if it wasn't for Dao Kuei's help, he would have been trapped in Tao Tai's body forever. According to the legends, nine-headed snakelet had 9 heads. 5 of them were male, and 4 were female. Male snakelings were good at using water, while female snakelings were good at using fire. The head in front of him could control the water vapor of heaven and earth. It was obviously male. It was no wonder that the water demons in the river would stop him at all costs. There was a ferocious beast like nine-headed snakelet in Dredge Mountain. No matter what kind of demon it was, they could only submit to it. After determining that the monster in front of him was nine-headed snakelet, Ning Chen immediately turned and ran. Whether he could defeat it or not, he didn't have much time left. It was getting closer to daybreak. If he didn't go back now, he could only wait to be burned to death by the heavenly fire. The area covered by the fog was huge. Ning Chen used his spiritual awareness to explore the way and quickly rushed in a direction. No matter where it led, he had to escape first. Nine-headed snakelet followed closely behind. Its cries came one after another. Every time it opened its mouth, it would spit out a black water arrow. It had a strong toxicity and was aimed at the human in front of it. Ning Chen didn't dare to take it head-on. He ran and dodged at the same time, trying his best not to let the black water touch him. His body was already in a mess. It would be best if he didn't add anything else to it. Boom! Nine-headed snakelet behind him seemed to be tired of following him. Its huge snake body swept horizontally. With a loud boom, the ancient trees collapsed. Ning Chen, who couldn't dodge in time, was swept away and sent flying far away. After running for half a day with great difficulty, he suddenly didn't know where to go. Ning Chen was really angry. He knew that it was too late to find another way out. Fortunately, he stopped running. He raised his sword and slashed at nine-headed snakelet. With a loud clang, Ning Chen immediately felt his right arm go numb. Sparks flew and the tip of the sword in his hand couldn't penetrate even half an inch. What a tough skin! Ning Chen was shocked. He immediately turned and ran. What was there to fight? Nine-headed snakelet continued to chase. It kept going back and forth and was unusually persistent. It had to swallow the human in front of it. The chase between the two continued until daybreak. Once Ning Chen found an opportunity, he would turn around and slash. Unfortunately, nine-headed snakelet's skin was shockingly tough. It was unharmed. The sky in the east gradually turned white. The first light of dawn was about to fall. After tormenting for half a night, Ning Chen, who couldn't win or escape, stopped running. Cold greed flashed in nine-headed snakelet's huge eyes. It opened its huge mouth and a huge suction force was emitted. Ning Chen laughed coldly. Didn't you want to eat people? I'll teach you a lesson. With a step, Ning Chen's body turned into a ray of light and entered nine-headed snakelet's mouth. At this moment, heavenly fire filled the sky above the nine heavens. It brought with it the power to destroy the heavens and earth and landed on nine-headed snakelet's body. Wah! A mournful cry sounded. Nine-headed snakelet's body twisted violently and crashed onto the ground with a loud boom. It startled the birds and beasts in the sky and flew away. Inside nine-headed snakelet's body, Ning Chen's black sword was firmly inserted into its flesh. No matter how nine-headed snakelet struggled, it refused to let go. Chapter 198. On Dredgley Mountain, heavenly fire gathered. The blazing flames continued to rise, forming a scene that could burn the sky. It was a terrifying scene. Within the flames, the nine-headed snakelet's huge snake body rolled violently, smashing through ancient trees one after another. The deafening sounds of collision caused the entire Dredgley Mountain to tremble. Inside the nine-headed snakelet, Ning Chen stabilized his body with the black sword and rolled along with the snake body. The heavenly fire burned the sky and destroyed the earth. The nine-headed snakelet's shrill cries could be heard. However, no matter how hard it struggled, it could not escape the burning of the heavenly fire. The nine-headed snakelet realized that its action of swallowing the human was wrong. It opened its huge mouth and tried to spit out the human in its stomach. Black poisonous water gushed out and sprinkled on the ground. The surrounding rocks and trees immediately turned black and were corroded into a mess. In the nine-headed snakelet's stomach, Ning Chen did not retreat. Instead, he went deeper into the snake's stomach with all his might. A human and a monster were competing in strength. One was drilling in, while the other was spitting out. They were in a stalemate. The heavenly fire was still burning. The nine-headed snakelet's vitality was frighteningly strong. After being burned for half a day, it was still struggling violently. Many people in the world saw this unbelievable scene. The flames in the sky continued to burn and did not extinguish. No one knew what was happening. If an innate expert was undergoing a tribulation, no one would be able to survive for such a long time. The nine-headed snakelet dragged its burning body and continued to struggle. Ning Chen refused to come out. The more he drilled, the deeper he went. After half a day, the nine-headed snakelet's struggles became weaker and weaker. Its cries also became weaker and weaker. It seemed to have lost its strength. On Dredgley Mountain, a huge snake body stretched across half of the mountain. It was motionless. Only the flames on the snake's body continued to burn, showing no signs of extinguishing. Ning Chen did not know where he had drilled to. When he felt that the nine-headed snakelet was no longer struggling, he finally had the energy to look at his surroundings. The surroundings seemed to be different from the snake's stomach he was in previously. The flesh and blood gradually disappeared and turned into something that looked like stone. Ning Chen recalled the situation he encountered when he entered the Tao Tai's stomach. After an unknown period of time, Ning Chen found another nine-headed snakelet's body. It looked very similar to the one he was swallowed in. The only difference was that this snake's body was made of stone. Gradually, the third snake body, the fourth, the fifth. Ning Chen found all 9 snake bodies. Just like the second one, they were all made of stone and not flesh and blood. This gigantic monster seemed to be living in another form of existence. It had turned its flesh and blood into stone and was in deep slumber all year round. For some reason, the only body of flesh and blood was not asleep. It was still awake, guarding the alienation mountain. Ning Chen was a little shocked. The 2 primitive places in the world both had legendary ferocious beasts. If it was a coincidence, it wouldn't make sense. Did they willingly sleep here, or were they sealed by someone? If such a thing were to truly awaken and wreak havoc on the world, even Xiantian experts of the 3 disasters realm would find it difficult to subdue it. What made him even more worried was that there were 2 other primitive lands in the world. He wondered if there were other monsters of this level in the world. The Tao Tai and the 9-headed snakelet were notorious vicious beasts in myths and legends. They had caused a lot of trouble in ancient times and were eventually subdued by the gods. Their whereabouts were unknown. He could accept the existence of martial artists, innate masters, and even monsters. However, when it came to gods, he would rather believe that they were just legends. If there were gods in the world, that would be the worst thing. The 9-headed snakelet's body seemed to be a huge space. On its body, the 9 snake bodies were spread out and the head and tail could not be seen. The sky outside was already dark. After sunset, the heavenly fire dissipated. According to legends, each head of the 9-headed snakelet represented a life. Ning Chen did not know if the head that swallowed him was still alive. He did not want to take the risk and decided to wait for another day. Inside the 9-headed snakelet's body, there were some artifacts from the human world. These artifacts had been through countless years and had almost turned to dust. They could no longer be used. Of course, not everything had been destroyed. Ning Chen had also noticed some items that were relatively intact. There was a spear, a copper cauldron, and an iron sword. All of them were mottled with rust and seemed as if they would break at any moment. The 3 items were not far from each other. The halberd was already damaged and broken. It told of the intense battle that the owner of the halberd had experienced when he was alive. However, Ning Chen still felt an indescribable chill from the halberd. It was similar to the feeling he had when he met Jingye Taichu, but it was not exactly the same. Without a doubt, the halberd was extraordinary. Even though most of its sharpness had been eroded by time, there was still a trace of strength left. As for the bronze cauldron and metal sword, Ning Chen kept them. He did not care if they were useful or not. He would take them away first. When the sun rose the next day, the heavenly fire descended once again. The 9-headed snakelet's body gradually could not hold on and started to burn from the inside. After a day, there was no more movement. When the people of the world saw the flames in the sky again, they did not know what to say. Strange things happened every year, but there were especially many this year. In thousands of years, this was the first time they had heard that the heavenly fire tribulation could burn for 2 days. The raging flames shone in the sky. The 9-headed snakelet's petrified body had already merged with the dredge mountain. It did not have any reaction to the heavenly fire. Only the flesh and blood of the 9-headed snakelet continued to burn. Only when the sky turned dark did it slowly extinguish. When half the night had passed, Ning Chen struggled to get out. He summoned the ghost palanquin and immediately left this damned place. The 9-headed snakelet's huge snake body had already destroyed the main peak of the dredge mountain. It was extremely desolate. When he passed by the river of water demons, Ning Chen retrieved the ancient realm and left immediately. Ruoshui clearly did not stay in the dredge mountain. Now, the only hope was the easternmost land. This place was frighteningly far. Even if he had the ghost palanquin, he might not be able to make it back in time. Tonight, no matter what, it was impossible. After returning to the underworld, Ning Chen heaved a sigh of relief. If possible, he really did not want to face these things that were beyond common sense. Being able to survive this time did not mean that he could survive the next time. In the depths of the underworld, the ghost woman was still in seclusion. It seemed that she would not come out until she reached the Xiantian realm. Ning Chen hoped that the ghost woman would come out as soon as possible. The underworld child had taken away the Wang clan's ancestor. The longer time passed, the more dangerous it would be. In this world, only the ghost woman could find the whereabouts of the underworld child. He did not have much contact with the underworld child, but he could still feel the terror of the underworld child. This terror did not refer to the underworld child's strength, but the latter's capricious personality. He did not follow any rules or morals. Everything he did was crazy and unpredictable. If such a person was allowed to reach the Xiantian realm, it would be a very scary thing. Only the Xiantian realm could kill the Xiantian realm. However, once the underworld child reached the Xiantian realm, he would definitely not be a match for an ordinary Xiantian realm expert. On the northern battlefield, the Shaoling ancient town had been conquered by the northern Meng army. There were no accidents. The 20,000 steel cavalry returned and regrouped with the army. Close to 10,000 heavy cavalry and 80,000 steel cavalry responded to each other. The banners were connected together, black and heavy, making it difficult for people to breathe. Duke Jingwu and the Marquis of Bloody Garb were finally able to gather their troops outside the Shaoling ancient town. The 130,000 imperial army stood in formation, trying to stop the northern Meng army here. After nightfall, Ning Chen did not rush to the easternmost land. Instead, he went to the barracks. His matters could be discussed later. Before that, he had to finish this battle first. In the commander's tent, Duke Jingwu nodded when he saw Ning Chen. Ning Chen returned the greeting and did not say anything else. He respected Jingwu Duke very much, but that didn't mean that his relationship with Jingwu Duke would improve even further. The third prince was Duke Jingwu's only disciple, and he was the one who forced the third prince to his death. This grudge had no right or wrong, and there was no way to resolve it. Duke Jingwu obviously had the same attitude. In one night, they only talked about the battle and did not talk about anything else. The Marquis of Bloody Garb handed the authority to Duke Jingwu to command the overall situation. He himself returned to the position of a general, which was what he was best at. The title of Bloody Garb was obtained through killing on the battlefield. After being bestowed the title of Marquis, there were many restrictions. In the imperial city, it had not been peaceful for the past few days. After Ning Chen's title of Martial Marquis was stripped, many people who were dissatisfied with him in the past repeatedly added insult to injury. They almost found Ning Chen and skinned him alive. However, a few people who knew the truth knew what was going on. Even the Marquis house was not taken back by Xia Mingri. Instead, he secretly sent many people to protect them. Some officials who did not have eyes, who dared to gossip or condone their subordinates and juniors to cause trouble in the Jiming house, were fined their salaries. The serious ones were directly banished out of the imperial city by Xia Mingri and exiled to the desolate lands. In the beginning, many officials did not know what was going on and thought it was just a coincidence. Later on, they felt that something was wrong. While keeping their mouths shut, they also strictly restricted their subordinates to not provoke the Jiming house. During this time, Zhang Sun did not say a word. He really stayed away from the court and did not interfere with any of Xia Mingri's decisions. The dukes and marquises in the north did not care about this at all. Every night, they would seriously discuss future war matters under the lights, trying their best to fight for the last hope of Great Xia. Ning Chen, Marquis Bloodgarb, and Duke Jingwu had not rested for 3 consecutive nights, trying their best to think of a plan and strategy. Today, Great Xia's situation could not get any worse. Their opponent was the smartest person in the world and the strong northern Meng iron cavalry. They could not afford to be careless. Since the start of the war between the two dynasties, the northern Meng strategist had come up with many ideas that were hard to defend against. This time, they had to be wary of any accidents and pull the war back to the initial battle of tactics and military strength. In the ancient town of Shaoling, a lady in a blue dress stood quietly in front of the formation. Her beautiful face had a sickly pale look. As the night wind blew, she would cough lightly. Her weak look made one's heart ache. If it were not for the great Xia land that was riddled with holes behind her, who would have thought that this beautiful and weak girl was the northern Meng strategist that everyone feared, the smartest person in the world? Chapter 199. Since ancient times, heroes were created in times of chaos. Fan Lingyue's appearance changed this truth. When Great Xia was at its peak, he appeared out of nowhere and destroyed this strong dynasty. Originally, this was not an era that created heroes. Great Xia that had been invincible for 1,000 years was far from falling. However, Fan Lingyue used an unreasonable method to forcefully change the pace of the era. The people of the world were fortunate because they were born in the same era as Fan Lingyue and witnessed him changing an era with his own strength. The people of the world were also unfortunate because they were born in the same era as Fan Lingyue and had to experience the cruelty of war. In the world, even if there was the invincible Great Xia and the unfathomable Eternal Night God sect, during the era that Fan Lingyue was alive, the most terrifying was still the Beimeng imperial court. Ning Chen and Fan Lingyue were the most similar people in the world and the people who knew each other the best. As such, they were the people who wanted the other to die the most. The standoff between the two armies lasted for 3 days. No one dared to move. Now was the most crucial moment, and every action would affect the direction of the battle. Fan Lingyue's Beimeng army did not have any abnormalities. After many days of marching, they rested up and did everything according to plan. In comparison, the Great Xia side was more nervous. After so many battles, the Great Xia soldiers were more or less fearful of the military advisor of Northern Meng. This was unavoidable. Losing once was not scary. What was scary was losing again and again. The war between the two dynasties had lasted for half a year, and Great Xia had not won a single time. Luckily, the combat quality of the Great Xia Guards Legion Corps was far from what normal soldiers could compare to. Even if their hearts were affected, they could still maintain strict discipline and high morale. After the 4th day, the two armies finally started to clash. On the Great Xia side, Duke Jingwu led the entire situation while Marquis Blood Cloak became the strongest general. He led the troops in every battle and was unstoppable. On the Beimeng side, the heavy cavalry was still the vanguard. The light cavalry and other soldier types worked together to complete the missions that Fan Lingyue gave them. They were like war machines, cold and strong. In the day, they beat the drums and beat the gongs at night. The battle between the two armies lasted for 10 days. The imperial army went from 130,000 soldiers to 110,000 soldiers. On the other hand, Northern Meng lost 80,000 cavalrymen and more than 10,000 infantrymen. Both armies suffered roughly the same losses. In truth, this seemingly equal number of casualties was the biggest imbalance. The Great Xia Guards Legion Corps were all carefully selected soldiers, and their individual combat strength was really strong. Not to say that they could fight 1 against 10, but 1 against 5 was not an exaggeration. However, facing the Northern Meng army that was mainly cavalry and had 3 armies working together, the strong Great Xia Guards Legion Corps could not gain any advantage. Ning Chen, Duke Jingwu, and Marquis Bloodrobe once again shifted their gazes to the nearly 10,000 heavy cavalry. The war between the two dynasties had been going on for so long, but these 10,000 heavy cavalry had only lost 1,000 when North River was covering the retreat. Other times, there were almost no casualties. We have to think of a way to stall these 9,000 heavy cavalry. Otherwise, we'll be too passive, Duke Jingwu said in a low voice. You can consider sending the Divine Wind Battalion out to fight while the rest of the Imperial Army provides cover. Elite against elite, forcefully separating these heavy cavalry from the other soldiers of Northern Meng, the Marquis suggested. Ning Chen frowned but did not say anything. He was also worried about the matter of the heavy cavalry. The 30,000 cavalry in the imperial city were still unable to fight. Facing the northern Meng heavy cavalry here was too difficult. This was also the key reason why the Great Xia Guard's Legion Corps had not been able to gain the upper hand. After thinking for a moment, Duke Jingwu approved of this idea. The Divine Wind Battalion was the strongest battalion of the Great Xia Guard's Legion Corps aside from the Dragon Guards. They might be able to block the northern Meng heavy cavalry in a direct confrontation. It's better to be careful. Just as Ning Chen was about to speak, a powerful pressure suddenly came from the heavens and the earth. The three of their expressions changed and they immediately walked out of the camp. They saw two figures flying through the air, directly rushing toward Shaoling City. They did not conceal their auras at all, and they were so powerful that it was shocking. All the soldiers below could clearly sense this kind of strength that surpassed humans. Xiantian experts. Ning Chen's expression was extremely grave. Without a doubt, they were Xiantian experts. Furthermore, there were two of them. How was this possible? The number of Xiantian experts in this world could be counted, and he recognized most of them. However, these two people were extremely unfamiliar to him. They are heading toward northern Meng, Marquis Bloodrobed said with a gloomy expression. What was going on? Ning Chen's eyes flickered. Where did these two people come from? Their appearance at this time was too suspicious. In the ancient town of Shaoling, in front of the northern Meng army, Fan Lingyue also walked out of the commander's tent. Looking at the two figures rushing over from afar, he frowned slightly. The two figures became more and more energetic, and in a short while, they arrived in front of the northern Meng army. All the soldiers of northern Meng were shocked by this terrifying pressure. However, the soldiers guarding the commander's tent still blocked in front of them, disregarding their lives to protect the tent. Everyone, retreat, Fan Lingyue ordered. Hearing the order, the soldiers immediately retreated like the tide without a moment of hesitation. You are the military advisor of the Northern Meng Imperial Court. Among the two, a green-robed old man said coldly. Yes, I am. May I know where you two are from? Fan Lingyue asked. Ascension Valley, the red-robed woman beside the green-robed old man said arrogantly. Fan Lingyue's eyes narrowed slightly. She knew this place. Many Xiantian experts who had disappeared in the world had gone there. Legend had it that Ascension Valley had a method to make people live forever. Thus, some Xiantian experts who were nearing the end of their lifespans were unwilling to die just like that. In the end, they all went to Ascension Valley. Why have the two of you come here? Fan Lingyue asked calmly. We've come to make a deal with you, the green-robed old man said slowly. Oh? What kind of deal? Fan Lingyue asked. Let that three disasters expert of Northern Meng help my Ascension Valley and open up the boundary. In exchange, when the Realm Master descends in the future, he will also leave a piece of land for the Northern Meng Imperial Court, the green-robed old man replied. Hearing these words, Fan Lingyue laughed instead, and said, Looks like the so-called Realm Master you speak of has already taken this piece of land as something that belongs to him. Am I, Fan Lingyue, too stupid, or have you all lived for too long, and your brains have become dull, to actually have such ideas about me? The Ascension Valley came to find you because they think highly of you. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, the red-robed woman snorted coldly. If I don't agree, what will you do? Fan Lingyue said indifferently. I've heard that other than Imperial Preceptor Northern Meng, the Eternal Night Cult also has a martial lord. I think that he will be more sensible than you. Having one spokesperson for the Ascension Valley in the human world is enough. As for the others, there is no need for them to exist, the red-robed woman threatened. I don't know if a martial lord is sensible or not, but I know that as long as I'm alive, the Eternal Night Cult won't have the guts. Since I can cripple the Great Xia, the Eternal Night Cult can also do the same. After saying that, Fan Lingyue took a step forward. His body shone with white light. With a wave of his hand, Jingye Taichu flew out from the tent and floated in front of him. You don't know what's good for you. The red-robed woman took a step forward and her Xiantian cultivation erupted, shaking heaven and earth. In front of the great Xia's tent, Ningchen felt the shaking of heaven and earth in the distance. He summoned his ghost palanquin and immediately rushed over. The Marquis was worried that this was a scheme of the Northern Meng imperial preceptor, so he followed with worry. The two of them were extremely fast. Before long, they were 10 miles away from the Northern Meng camp. As a result, a shocking scene appeared in front of the two of them. In front of the Northern Meng army, Fan Lingyue's white light illuminated heaven and earth. The Jingye Taichu in his hand was unusually swift and fierce. He was fighting 1 against 2, but he was still able to suppress the two of them. Ning Chen was shocked and even more shocked. He had also fought against Xiantian experts before, and he could barely keep himself from being defeated. He didn't expect Fan Lingyue to be able to suppress 2 Xiantian experts by himself. Beside him, the Marquis' eyes were also filled with shock. It was difficult for a Hotian to fight against an Xiantian expert, but it wasn't impossible. However, it was almost impossible for a Hotian to suppress an Xiantian expert, not to mention fighting 1 against 2. Not only Ning Chen and the Marquis, even the red-robed woman and the green-robed old man were shocked. Their moves quickly dissipated in the lustrous white light. They were completely useless. Even Xiantian experts didn't dare to face the Jingye Taichu head-on. As they attacked, blood could already be seen. The more the red-robed woman fought, the more shocked she became. She said anxiously, "Fan Lingyue, don't you want to take down De Xia? Ascension Valley can help you realize this wish. As for Northern Meng's future, the Valley Master is kind and will definitely not mistreat you." Fan Lingyue's eyes were cold, and the white light on his body became even brighter. He said, "Whether I can take down De Xia or not is my own business. The future of Northern Meng and the Divine Great Land is not up to Ascension Valley to decide." When Ning Chen and Marquis blood-robed Marquis, who were 10 miles away, heard the name of the Ascension Valley, their faces turned pale. As a martial Marquis of the Great Xia dynasty, he naturally knew more things than ordinary warriors. The Ascension Valley was the most mysterious unknown place in the world. Hundreds of years ago, a Xiantian from the Great Xia dynasty's royal family had entered and died there, never to leave again. Legend had it that Ascension Valley had the secret of longevity, but no one knew whether it was true or not. This was because no one had ever seen anyone walk out of Ascension Valley alive. Scroll of the Moon, Silent Moonfall. Behind Fan Lingyue, the white light bloomed like a second moon rising, illuminating the world. The Scroll of the Moon technique reappeared in the world. Instantly, wherever the moonlight shone, everything became silent and still. The green-robed old man and the red-robed woman froze, unable to move. In that instant, Jingye Taichu's sword cut his throat. The green-robed old man's eyes widened, and he fell down unwillingly. At this moment, the red-robed woman broke free from her restraints. She was so shocked that she no longer dared to fight. Her figure flashed, and she quickly fled. Fan Lingyue did not chase after her. He covered his mouth and coughed violently. Blood spurted out and flowed through the gaps between his fingers. "Have you seen enough? If you want to kill me, now is the best time." After a moment of gasping for breath, Fan Lingyue raised his head and looked at Ning Chen and the Marquis in the distance. "See you on the battlefield." Ning Chen replied and turned to leave. The Marquis also left without making a move. Fan Lingyue's strength was shocking. Even in their current state, they were not confident that they could win. In addition, they did not want to make a move tonight. Chapter 200. When Ning Chen left, it was already late and he didn't have time to return to the Great Xia camp. After bidding farewell to Marquis Bloodrobed, he returned to the underworld. Marquis Bloodrobed sent the news of Ascension Valley's appearance back to the palace. This was a big deal. If Ascension Valley appeared, the situation would be even more complicated. Another thing was Fan Lingyue's strength. Tonight, they were truly shocked. In this world, the person who fought with Fan Lingyue the most was Ning Chen. They fought twice and both times, they lost miserably. Therefore, they couldn't figure out the upper limit of Fan Lingyue's strength. Tonight, even two innate experts were defeated. One died and the other escaped. What a terrifying battle record. After tonight's incident, one thing was basically confirmed. It was impossible to assassinate Fan Lingyue. As long as they couldn't break the white light and defend Jingye Taichu, no one in this world could kill her. It was hard to imagine how terrifying Fan Lingyue would be if she broke through to the innate realm. Fortunately, this was an impossible assumption. Otherwise, Great Xia would be finished. No matter how strong one was, there would be a time when they were exhausted and still belonged to the category of humans. Once they entered the innate realm, they would have to add the word heaven before humans. As a celestial, they couldn't be killed by human strength. After Ningchen returned to the underworld, he had been thinking about Ascension Valley. He and Marquis Bloodrobed didn't hear the whole thing, but they heard a few key points. The woman in red mentioned the term Realm Master and also mentioned helping Northern Meng defeat Great Xia. From the conversation, Ascension Valley had something to ask Fan Lingyue for help. The price was to help Northern Meng destroy Great Xia, but Fan Lingyue rejected it. Fan Lingyue said that Northern Meng and the Divine Continent weren't in Ascension Valley's control. The meaning behind this was thought-provoking. Obviously, Fan Lingyue knew something that he didn't. Before tonight, he had never heard of any Realm Master in Ascension Valley. Listening to the woman in red's tone, she seemed to be very respectful to this Realm Master. A person who could be respected by innate experts was undoubtedly at least a 3 disasters expert. Realm Master, Lord of a Realm. This was the most superficial meaning. He didn't even dare to think about the deeper matters. He would rather believe that this was just a title and not something he didn't dare to think about. This world was already chaotic enough. It could no longer withstand the invasion of another realm. Ningchen knocked hard on his head and stopped thinking about random things. Since Ascension Valley had asked Fan Lingyue for help, it meant that Ascension Valley was still unable to come into being. It wouldn't be a major problem for the time being. Currently, the greatest enemy of Great Xia was still Fan Lingyue. No matter what, this war had to end as soon as possible. The earlier it ended, the earlier Great Xia could rest up and deal with future problems. In Northern Meng's camp, in the commander's tent, Fan Lingyue, who had just gone through a great battle, looked a little pale. However, he still dragged his sick body and thought about the battle step by step. Bei Meng had already fought his way here and would soon crush the final resistance of Great Xia. She had to do her best to hold on. As for the Ascension Valley, she was not worried. There were countless experts in the Divine Prefecture. Regardless of whether the future owner was Great Xia or Northern Meng, they were not afraid of the ambitious realm. Military advisor, Xiao Wanhua said worriedly as he walked into the tent. Marquis Xiao, what's the matter? Fan Lingyue raised his head and asked calmly. The Imperial Preceptor has already made the necessary preparations, and he'll be here soon. Are we really not going to wait any longer? Xiao Wanhua asked. We're not going to wait any longer. Fan Lingyue shook her head. Originally, this was the surprise she had prepared for Great Xia. However, since Ningchen said that they would meet on the battlefield, then this time, victory and defeat would be decided on the battlefield. Even if she didn't use any surprise troops, she wasn't afraid of anyone in terms of formations. Continue to send troops to attack. Don't give the Great Xia Imperial Army a chance to breathe, Fan Lingyue said. Yes, Xiao Wanhua respectfully accepted the order and immediately left. Inside the Netherworld mansion, Ningchen recalled the countermeasure that the Marquis of Bloodrobe and Jing Wugong had discussed last night. Using the Divine Wind Battalion to hold back the Northern Meng heavy cavalry was not a wrong idea. Generally speaking, using elites to fight elites was the best way to reduce the losses. However, he was worried that once the Divine Wind Battalion and the heavy cavalry were pulled out alone, would the remaining Imperial Army be able to stop the flood-like Northern Meng cavalry? Northern Meng still had 70,000 elite cavalry and 60,000 infantry. It was hard to say whether Great Xia could stop them or not. Outside of Shaoling, the two armies clashed, and it was abnormally intense. The Divine Wind Battalion moved out and used their powerful combat strength to block the charge of the Northern Meng heavy cavalry. The cavalry that flanked them were also blocked by the Imperial Army. The battle lasted from noon to sunset before the two armies retreated. Fan Lingyue stood at the front of the formation and watched the battle. Looking at the formation Great Xia sent out, the light in her eyes kept jumping. Using force against force was indeed a good method. Duke Jingwu and Marquis Bloodclad were indeed much stronger than those useless generals of Great Xia. Retreat. Seeing that it was getting late, Fan Lingyue ordered. A moment later, the gong sounded, and the Northern Meng army retreated like a flood. They were orderly and without a trace of panic. On the other side, the Great Xia Imperial Army also retreated. They were similarly disciplined and not anxious. Without a doubt, the Great Xia Imperial Army and Northern Meng cavalry outside of Shaoling were the most elite forces in the world. In comparison, the Great Xia Imperial Army's individual combat ability was stronger, while the Northern Meng cavalry's group charging ability was unparalleled. Both armies had their own advantages and trump cards. Overall, Northern Meng had more troops and had a slight advantage, but it was not too obvious. Let the soldiers have a good rest tonight. Tomorrow, we will go down south. Fan Lingyue said to Xiao Wanhua before returning to the commander's tent. Xiao Wanhua understood and immediately went to make arrangements. When night was about to fall, Fan Lingyue came to a tent and said, "Mr. Jian Er, please help me with something." Jian Er walked out and looked at the woman in front of him. He smiled and said, "If you want me to kill that Jiming Marquis, then I am powerless. I alone cannot do it. There is no need to kill him. Mr. Jian Er, you just have to stop him. The battle tomorrow is extremely important, and I do not wish for him to appear in the Great Xia camp tonight. That is not difficult." However, after the last encirclement, he appeared in a different location every time. "Can you calculate where he will appear from?" Jian Er asked curiously. "Of course." Fan Lingyue nodded and said, "Mr. Jian Er, please follow me." After saying that, the two walked toward the empty space far away from the tent. Under the night sky, they stopped facing the west. Fan Lingyue's body was covered in white light. She flipped her hand and a golden ancient scroll flew out. In an instant, the golden brilliance illuminated the world, extremely dazzling. Chaos Scroll. Jian Er's eyes flashed, and the smile on his face disappeared. So the Chaos Scroll was really in Fan Lingyue's hands. The moment the Chaos Scroll appeared, the Eternal Night scripture slowly opened in the Sea of Nothingness of the Eternal Night sect. The black light shone brightly, constantly swallowing everything around it. In the first shrine, the martial lord who had returned to his shrine to recuperate sensed the changes in the scripture. He narrowed his eyes and disappeared. A moment later, the martial lord appeared in the Sea of Nothingness. Looking at the Eternal Night scripture that he was flipping, he immediately understood what was going on. In this world, the only thing that could interfere with the Chaos Scroll was the Chaos Scroll in Fan Lingyue's hands. "What do you want to know?" the martial lord coldly asked. Fan Lingyue, who was thousands of miles away, seemed to be able to hear it. She used the Chaos Scroll to guide the aura of the Sea of Nothingness and condensed the two words Ning Chen. In the blink of an eye, it scattered into the void. "I'll help you this time, but there won't be a next time." The martial lord flipped his palm and activated the Eternal Night scripture. It quickly flipped, and rays of black light spread out, inspecting the world. Northwest of Fog Forest. The Eternal Night scripture quickly found Ning Chen's whereabouts. Fan Lingyue, who was thousands of miles away, immediately stopped after seeing through the Chaos Scroll. He took the northwest route of Fog Forest. It's very likely that he will pass by Changli City. Mr. Jian Er can go there and stop him. Fan Lingyue said with a trace of exhaustion in her voice. Jian Er nodded and said nothing. His feet moved, and he turned into a ray of sword light and flew away. In the Sea of Nothingness, the martial lord waved his hand and closed the Eternal Night scripture. Rays of innate chi sealed the scripture's surroundings, completely blocking the possibility of the chaos scroll interfering. The current Eternal Night scripture was not only the light scroll, but also controlled too many secrets of the Eternal Night cult. He absolutely could not let Fan Lingyue have the opportunity to invade. Far away from the northern Meng camp, under the night sky, Fan Lingyue coughed out a mouthful of blood. Her expression was extremely cold. She saw something she shouldn't have. The Eternal Night cult's goal was indeed not as simple as it seemed. She had some suspicions before, and today, it was finally confirmed. Mars guarding the heart, 100 years of darkness in the mortal world. As it turned out, the source of this disaster was really the Eternal Night cult. De Xia's fate began to weaken 2 days before Mars guarding the heart. When Mars guarding the heart appeared, the fate above the northern Meng Imperial Palace, Barbarian King Palace, Buddha Kingdom's Mijia Mountain and other places also weakened to varying degrees. It was just that it was not as obvious as De Xia's. She had not completely guessed whether this 100 years referred to the 100 years of war or other disasters. However, there was no doubt that the Eternal Night cult was the biggest source of the disaster. The Eternal Night cult had 2 experts of the 3 disasters, but also a martial monarch. There was still another one who had not made any moves. It was inevitable that people would be suspicious. Moreover, she also knew that the Eternal Night cult had more than one temple. In the past, before the rise of the Great Xia, the Eternal Night cult was at its peak. The first temple was only the vanguard responsible for expanding the territory. There was another temple behind it that was responsible for managing the internal affairs of the temples and resolving all the worries of the first temple. If she guessed correctly, the instigator of this disaster was the second temple that had been silent all this time. What an amazing junior! What a pity, in the academy, the moment the Book of Chaos interfered with the mysteries of heaven, the headmaster's muddled eyes became clear for a brief moment. He looked at the ancient town of Shaoling and sighed in his heart. There was actually such a powerful woman in the future. It was a pity that the heavens were jealous of her. The heavens were flawed, and so were humans. Perfect people should not appear. It's really a pity, the headmaster sighed softly and turned back to the wooden house. This woman was destined not to live for long. Otherwise, even if De Xia was defeated, it would be worth it. Chapter 201. The night wind blew and the moonlight was enchanting. Outside Changli City, Sword 2 stood in the wilderness, his gentle expression without any killing intent as he waited for the person to arrive. The ghost palanquin appeared in the distant night, silently speeding over. The corner of Sword 2's mouth curled up slightly, his smile warm. Very far away, the palanquin stopped, no longer moving forward. "Don't worry, it's just me," Sword 2 chuckled. Ning Chen got off the palanquin and observed for a long time before walking forward. "You are?" Ning Chen asked with a doubtful expression. Sword 2 answered honestly. Ning Chen's eyes twitched. How did the second disciple of Sword City know his whereabouts? "You can't go over tonight. However, it's up to you to decide whether to fight or not," Sword 2 said amiably. "Fan Lingyue sent you?" Ning Chen frowned and asked. "You can say that," Sword 2 answered. "Then let's fight." Ning Chen's figure moved, arriving in front of Sword 2. Frost condensed on his fingers as he drew a silver sword aura. Sword 2 leaned to the side, his left face brushing past the sword aura. With a flip of his palm, he blocked the sword aura. The two of them each took half a step back, testing each other's moves. It was a draw. Ning Chen drew his sword following him as he pressed forward again. The cold sword danced in the night. The injured man and sword were no longer as strong as before, but their battle intent had never weakened. "I can't kill you, and you can't go over either. Why do you still want to fight?" Sword 2 waved his right hand and his sword flew out of its sheath into his hand, blocking the black sword aura. "There aren't so many reasons in the world. If I have to say, it's just that I don't like you." The black sword in Ning Chen's hand became stronger. His sword intent spread out, giving off a soul-threatening killing aura. You only have sword intent and no power. You have no chance of winning. Sword 2 blocked the sword aura in front of him and pushed his cultivation, striking out with his sword. Ning Chen blocked the attack, but his figure suddenly retreated. The difference between their cultivation was obvious at this moment. His once peerless foundation had now become an illusion. His vital energy was severely hindered, and even the 3 scrolls of heavenly tomes were useless. Ning Chen's moves were light and quick. He played to his strengths and avoided his weaknesses. He tried his best to turn the battle into a competition of moves. Jian Tu remained unmoved. His sword was heavy, and every move of his strange sword was activated. His powerful foundation was unshakable. It was an unfair battle. The battle outside Changli City was unusually fierce. There was no such thing as absolute fairness in the world. It was natural for the strong to be the king. Ning Chen and Jian Er both understood this principle. Therefore, once they made a move, they would use their killing moves without mercy. Jian Er was the disciple who fought the least in Desolate City. His strength was unfathomable. After meeting him today, Ning Chen realized that the second disciple of Sword City was unimaginably strong. Waves of the world flow to the east. With a flip of his palm, Ning Chen's left and right palm swords moved side by side. After a palm strike, the ink sword immediately arrived. It's useless. Sword 2 slashed apart the huge wave and blocked the black sword. His genuine chi vibrated and instantly sent the figure in front of him flying. Ning Chen fell to the ground in a sorry state and took several steps back. Black blood dripped from the corner of his mouth and dyed his clothes black. How sad it is for a hero to be short of breath. Jian Er sighed and said with emotion. A man's reputation was like a tree's shadow. The Marquis of Jiming was so powerful that he was unparalleled under the nascent heaven realm. He defeated the Buddha in the human world and fought to a draw with the young master of the heavenly pavilion of compassion who was half a step away from the nascent heaven realm. He had shocked the world again and again. You're wrong about one thing. I've never been a hero. Ning Chen forcefully activated his martial arts and condensed them around his body. Frost surged and he stabbed his sword into the ground. When the snow is about to fall, the sword will snow for 3,000 miles. As the sword stabbed into the ground, the slowly falling wind and snow suddenly dispersed. The sword intent burst out like thousands of ice swords exploding and sweeping across the world. First move. Jian Er said softly. Then he fully activated his martial arts and the sword power surged. It turned into a purple divine sword that reached the 9th heaven and chopped down. The 2 moves collided and the sky collapsed. In the fierce wind, Ning Chen flew out. Even Jian Er couldn't withstand the extreme power. He took 2 steps back and his chi and blood surged. After one move, Ning Chen was injured and Jian Er retreated. Genuine chi overflowed and Ning Chen's figure flew out again. His sword split the waves and his power shook the sky. Second move. Jian Er said. His sword shone brightly and once again collided with Ning Chen's all-out move. The sword of opening the sky and severing the sea against the barren city's unique martial arts. Originally, they were evenly matched. However, because of the difference in foundation and martial arts, the situation gradually changed. After another collision, the corner of Jian Er's mouth was dyed red. His expression was still calm and indifferent. More than 10 steps away, Ning Chen spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered. That's the second move. With your current body, how many more moves can you make like this? Jian Er said calmly as he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. On the opposite side, Ning Chen coughed violently. After only 2 moves, his body began to weaken. Blood stained his ink-black clothes and was extremely dazzling. One night is actually very short. However, if we continue to fight, perhaps I can kill you alone. Jian Er glanced at the gradually darkening night and said lightly. Outside Changli City, people had arrived at some point and were increasing in number. They were watching the two fighting from afar. Suddenly, someone shouted. "Who is that?" "The Marquis of Jiming." This sudden shout immediately caused an uproar. The more people looked at him, the more they found him to be the Marquis of Jiming, who had been stripped of his title and was wanted by the whole country. Jian stopped his sword and said softly, "It seems that even if I don't stop you tonight, it will be very difficult for you to pass." The people in the night quickly rushed towards the two. At this time, those who had not returned to the city to rest were mostly warriors who made a living outside. When they saw the Marquis of Jiming who was wanted by the imperial court, it was as if they saw a white reward. The crowd surrounded Ning Chen and immediately rushed forward. It was said that the Marquis of Jiming's martial arts were extraordinary. However, they had the advantage in numbers. What was there to be afraid of? Stupid people. How sad. Jian sighed and stepped back, leaving the place for the upcoming battle. Ning Chen, who had not retreated even when he faced Sword 2, subconsciously retreated step by step when he saw the citizens surrounding him. "You can kill them. This is not difficult for you. After all, you have killed tens of thousands of people. A few more won't make a difference," Jian suggested. His tone was calm, but there was an indescribable coldness. "Everyone, let's go together. After we catch him, the reward of 100,000 taels of silver is enough for us to split." In the crowd, a bare-chested man in linen clothes shouted and immediately rushed forward. The crowd was encouraged and rushed forward at the same time. The sword light was piercing, cutting into the hearts of the people who were protecting them. The sharp ink sword was no longer sharp. Ning Chen moved his sword, but he could not find a reason to use it. He had killed tens of thousands of Buddhist disciples and made the entire Yunling blood flow like a river, leaving no one alive. However, at this moment, facing the people of the Xia kingdom, his ink sword was as heavy as a mountain. After losing its sharpness, all that was left was the helplessness of his fists and feet. Ning Chen's fists and elbows continuously forced the crowd away. He did not kill them, but deterred them first. However, Ning Chen underestimated the temptation of 100,000 taels of silver to these people. After being knocked down once, they got up and continued to rush forward. In this world, people die for wealth and birds die for food. Now that he was just knocked down, how could it stop the madness of the people? Not far away, Jian watched this scene quietly. Under his gentle smile, there was coldness. This was human nature. It was naked, undisguised, and extremely ugly. More and more people gathered around, from dozens of people to more than 100 people, until it was too many to count. This place was not far from Changli City, and the previous battle had already alarmed too many people. "Jiming Marquis, you have killed the innocent and harmed the loyal. Heaven will not tolerate this. Tonight, no matter what, you will not escape." The words pierced through the heart, and the cold blade was threatening. The angry people and the righteous people wanted to enforce justice on behalf of heaven and eliminate the scum of the imperial court in front of them. Ning Chen's punches and kicks were getting slower and slower. The blade wounds on his body were also increasing. The black blood was telling the most ruthless and cruel truth. His blood is black, he is indeed a monster. The people were getting angrier and angrier. Looking at the unkillable monster in front of them, their anger reached its peak. Facing the angry people, Ning Chen was having a hard time dealing with them. "Let me help you." Jian moved his sword, and a sharp sword light flashed across, sweeping towards the few people who attacked the most ruthlessly. Seeing this, Ning Chen's pupils constricted. He slapped away the few people beside him, and his body moved. He took 2 steps forward, and his ink sword condensed into frost. With a bang, it dispersed the sword light. At the same time, numerous blade lights slashed down from behind him. Ning Chen could not dodge in time, and blood gushed out from his back like a waterfall. Ning Chen's stumbling figure barely stabilized. He did not know how many blade wounds he had. After slapping away the people beside him, he looked more and more tired. Faster, faster. In the distance, Groups of soldiers heard the news and rushed over. When they saw Jiming Marquis, they quickly surrounded him. Capture him, life or death. The leading general waved his hand and said coldly. Jian smiled lightly, turned around and left step by step. Jiming Marquis, this is the great Xia that you are protecting. Tonight, I have learned something new. There will be a later stage. The mocking words of parting were ear-piercing. Ning Chen, who was standing among the soldiers, looked at the people around him who were either greedy or angry. He felt an indescribable helplessness in his heart. He would never have thought that one day, the people blocking his path would not be the northern Meng imperial court but the soldiers and civilians of Great Xia. The bright moon traveled west. Half a night had passed, and it was impossible to travel north. Ning Chen sighed heavily in his heart and turned around to leave. Hundreds of soldiers raised their weapons and charged over, but they felt an irresistible force sweep them away. The 100 or so people closest to Ning Chen were instantly thrown off their horses and fell to the ground. In the next moment, the ghost carriage appeared, and Ning Chen walked in. He did not look back again. The ghost carriage traveled south, returning to the netherworld. When the sky was about to brighten, Jian returned to the northern Meng camp. Fan Lingyue was waiting in front of the commander's tent. Seeing him return, she said calmly, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Sword 2 smiled and didn't say anything else. He went straight back to his own tent. Fan Lingyue did not ask anything either. If she only wanted the result, that Ning Chen did not come tonight, that was enough. "Advisor, everything is ready." Xiao Wanhua walked over and said respectfully. "Thank you, Marquis Xiao." Fan Lingyue nodded. Chapter 202. As the sky lit up, the two armies faced each other. In front of the northern Meng army, 9,000 heavy cavalry were clad in black armor, revealing only their eyes. They were filled with killing intent. Behind the heavy cavalry was the tide-like northern Meng cavalry. Once the 70,000 cavalry charged, it was enough to flatten all obstacles. The northern Meng imperial court was a country on horseback. Their people were valiant, and everyone could ride and shoot. They were the best at fighting. In front of the three armies, Xiao Wanhua sat on horseback with a halberd in his hand. He looked at the blood-robed figure in the distance with a cold expression. In front of the Great Xia army, Marquis Bloodrobe's eyes were filled with anger. Great Xia had been shamed by northern Meng for 1,000 years. The two marquises, who were once subjects of the same palace, met today. On the battlefield, there was nothing to say. Only blood could wash away the hatred in their hearts. Kill! With a single order, the two armies charged forward, and soon after, they clashed. The invincible heavy cavalry was still unstoppable, like a sharp blade stabbing into the Great Xia camp. In the next moment, the 30,000 elite guards of the Divine Wind Battalion stepped forward, blocking the path of the heavy cavalry. The remaining 80,000 guards fought against the 70,000 cavalry of northern Meng. The moment they clashed, blood flowed like a river. In the intense battle, wave after wave of attacks, the northern Meng cavalry and the Great Xia Imperial Army engaged in an all-out battle, and the battle instantly reached its climax. The strict arrangement of formations and the various soldier types was the best way to stop the cavalry. Although the Great Xia Imperial Army fought bitterly, they finally managed to slow down the pace of the northern Meng cavalry. On the other side, Marquis Bloodrobed and Xiao Wanhua were engaged in a battle of life and death. The moment they made their moves, there was no leeway left. The ground continued to crack. There was no need to doubt the strength of the Great Xia Imperial Marquis. If it wasn't for the fact that he had killed too many people, he would have already stepped into the Xiantian realm. Around the two of them, true qi vibrated, forming a vacuum that no one could get close to. Soldier against soldier, general against general, their sharpness against sharpness, pressuring one's mind. Jingwu Duke and Fan Lingyue looked at each other from afar, both of them calculating. This was the most crucial battle, and they couldn't afford to fail. Whoosh! A soldier of the Divine Wind Battalion stabbed his spear into the chest of a northern Meng cavalry. Blood spurted out of the wound, attracting the attention of many people. Gradually, more and more heavy cavalry soldiers were pierced by the spears, and the casualties of the northern Meng heavy cavalry began to increase. Clang! Not far away, a long spear pierced the body of a galloping heavy cavalry. However, it was forcibly broken and could not be damaged in the slightest. These two completely opposite situations made the officers and soldiers of Divine Wind Battalion somewhat confused. The three commanders began to realize that something was wrong, but it was already too late. In the next moment, 8,000 cavalry in black armor appeared. They avoided the God Wind unit and charged into the Great Xia Guard's Legion Corps formation. The terrifying destructive power immediately messed up the formation of the Great Xia Guard's Legion Corps. The Bei Meng cavalry took the chance to follow up, and the 70,000 soldiers trampled over the Great Xia camp. The situation changed in an instant. Before the Great Xia side could react, they had already sunk into the molten iron current. Half a day later, the battle ended. All the northern Meng soldiers who were trapped by the Divine Wind Battalion had died in the battle, and the 1,000 heavy cavalry soldiers who were used as bait were no exception. However, northern Meng had won the war. On the plains, the messy formation of infantry would never be able to defeat the strong iron cavalry. After this battle, 40,000 of the Great Xia Guard's Legion Corps died, and they suffered a huge loss. The northern Meng side also suffered many casualties. However, compared to the Great Xia side, it was already a rare victory. 8,000 heavy cavalry, 60,000 iron cavalry, and 50,000 infantry once again went south. Compared to before, more than half of the 120,000 troops had been lost. However, the defensive line of Great Xia was also not much left. The heavy cavalry was difficult to defeat. Great Xia staked everything on one throw, using the Divine Wind Battalion to block them. However, this also allowed Fan Lingyue to find an opening to break through. Of the 9,000 heavy cavalry soldiers trapped by the Divine Wind Battalion, only 1,000 were real. They were used as bait to confuse the Divine Wind Battalion. Northern Meng had an abundance of horses, and each person had 2 horses. They would never mix the horses used in battle and in normal times. However, this time, the 8,000 infantrymen who acted as bait and followed the 1,000 cavalrymen were all riding secondary horses. The people of northern Meng were good at riding and shooting. Even the infantry soldiers were very strong at fighting on horseback. However, facing the Divine Wind Battalion of Great Xia, these soldiers were all killed without a doubt. Under the night sky, when Ning Chen arrived and saw the scene of devastation, he felt a piercing pain in his heart. How is it? Do you still think that Great Xia will not fall? Xiao Wanhua appeared and looked at the figure under the moonlight. Why? What did Fan Lingyue promise you? Ning Chen raised his head and asked in confusion. He couldn't understand why the Beiwu Marquis had betrayed them. However, seeing this vast sea of fog, he couldn't help but be shocked. Suddenly, Ning Chen was stunned. He saw a figure in white sitting at the end of heaven and earth. He was motionless, as if he was waiting for something. He was in his 30s. His face was ordinary and there was nothing special about him. There wasn't even a trace of a warrior's aura. However, Ning Chen still felt an unprecedented pressure. For the entire day, Ning Chen didn't dare to approach him. He didn't know who this person was, but he was sure that even if there were 100 of him, he wouldn't be able to defeat this person. The figure in white didn't pay attention to Ning Chen. He still sat there quietly, waiting for something. When the sun was about to set, the sea of fog began to sink. Ning Chen pulled out his ink sword and stabbed it into the cliff. He then continued to wait for the night to come. At this moment, the figure in white glanced at the ink sword and then looked at Ning Chen. A trace of disappointment flashed through his eyes. What a waste of a good sword. Mu Bai muttered softly. His words were very soft. However, Ning Chen, who was thousands of zhang away, heard it clearly. Ning Chen's mood wasn't good. He wanted to reply, "None of your business." However, he didn't dare to say it. Not long later, the sky finally darkened. Ning Chen took the ink sword and climbed up the cliff bit by bit. He returned to the land. The sea of fog below him had already descended to an unknown place. It was gray and hazy. He couldn't see anything clearly. Ning Chen left on the ghost sedan chair and began to search for traces of Ruoshui in this vast and boundless land of the East. The first night passed peacefully. Ning Chen didn't find anything. When the eastern horizon lit up, he returned to the sea of fog. During the day, Ning Chen had nothing to do. He could only stand on the sea of fog and practice his sword while waiting for the sun to set. He didn't know that in the distance, Mu Bai was frowning as he looked at his clumsy sword. "Don't insult the sword in your hand again. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to stop myself from killing you," said Mu Bai coldly. Ning Chen was startled. The fury he had been suppressing for a long time finally erupted. "I'll practice my sword." "None of your business." As a person of the future, Ning Chen had been suppressing his own nature every day. He was doing his best to help the Grand Xia pass through this calamity. However, the longer he suppressed it, the greater the backlash. For a youth who wasn't even 20 years old to maintain absolute calm was an extremely cruel matter. After Ning Chen finished cursing, he felt refreshed. At the same time, he also felt a bit of regret. He had been too impulsive. As expected, the distant Mu Bai frowned. His eyes flashed and the sea of fog churned. A ray of sword chi appeared out of nowhere and instantly arrived in front of Ning Chen. In that instant, Ning Chen felt an intense sense of danger. He subconsciously dodged, and the sword chi brushed past his right chest, leaving behind a terrifying wound. "Your sword cultivation is a complete mess, but your reaction isn't bad." Mu Bai didn't attack again and gave an objective evaluation. Ning Chen didn't dare provoke him again. He courteously cupped his hands towards Mu Bai and said, "Thank you, senior, for being lenient." He wasn't an idiot. He naturally saw that the attack just now didn't contain much killing intent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stand here so calmly. "How is Mu Qingxue? Do you remember the past?" asked Mu Bai indifferently. Ning Chen was stunned when he heard this question, and then his expression changed abruptly. Chapter 203. Mu Bai. Ning Chen's shock was indescribable. Without a doubt, the person sitting at the end of this world was Desolate City's sword. Junior Ning Chen greets Senior Mu Bai. "Please forgive me for my rudeness just now." After recovering, Ning Chen's back was covered in cold sweat. He respectfully bowed and apologized sincerely. When a person was unlucky, even drinking cold water would get stuck in their teeth. He hadn't expected that just cursing would provoke such a monster. "You still haven't answered my question," said Mu Bai indifferently. Ning Chen shook his head. "No. She still doesn't remember anything." Hearing that answer, Mu Bai stopped asking. He withdrew his gaze and continued waiting for the primal chaos fog sea to condense. Ning Chen didn't dare disturb Mu Bai any longer. He also didn't dare to practice his sword. He could only wander around the fog sea. The primal chaos fog sea was an extremely special place. It was like a sea of fog. Walking in it was like walking on water. After wandering around for half a day, Ning Chen slowly sank down, wanting to see what was below. The primal chaos fog sea was bottomless, and visibility was also frighteningly low. It was like being in a boundless sea. Gradually, the pressure coming from all directions grew stronger. Intense pain came from Ning Chen's body. He had clearly reached his limit. The undying body was completely useless here. The omnipresent pressure would crush everything into pieces. No matter what kind of special physique one possessed, it would be useless here. Just as Ning Chen was about to reach his limit and float up, he saw an exceptionally dense fog floating not far below him. It was extremely strange. This sudden sight piqued Ning Chen's curiosity. He endured the pain in his body and sank down once more. The closer they got, the clearer the fog became. The dark gray vortex, about 10 zhang in diameter, slowly rotated. At the center, snow-like things began to condense. It was extremely strange. Ning Chen stretched out his hand to touch it. However, when he touched the outermost part of the fog, he couldn't go any further. What the hell is this? A strange light flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. This fog was clearly different from the surrounding fog. It was condensing from all directions toward the center. The pressure around him grew stronger. Ning Chen didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly floated up. It was already late in the world. Mu Bai was still sitting there, waiting. He paid no attention to anything else. Not long after Ning Chen came up, the sea of fog began to sink and soon disappeared from sight. When night fell, Ning Chen went out to look for Ruo Shui again. The easternmost land was too big. It was not possible to find a river in a day or two. That night, Ning Chen also gained nothing. Before dawn, he returned to the sea of fog. Inside and outside the world, the two of them were like two parallel lines, neither of them paying attention to the other. Ning Chen didn't dare, but Mu Bai didn't care at all. In the heart of the sword in Desolate City, there was only the sword. Nothing else was important. During the day, Ning Chen had nothing else to do, so he sank into the sea of fog and observed the changes in the fog. His intuition told him that this thing was definitely not simple. A martial artist's intuition was like a woman's sixth sense. Sometimes, it was more important than anything else. The fog vortex continued to shrink, from 10 zhang to 8 zhang. The solidified part in the center was also increasing. It was obvious that this huge vortex must have been shockingly huge at the beginning, and now it was at its final moment. For the next 7 days, Ning Chen would go out to look for Ruo Shui at sunset. When the day came, he would sink into the sea of fog to observe this strange phenomenon. On the 8th day, when the vortex had shrunk to 3 zhang, its speed suddenly slowed down. The gray solid in the center was gathering faster and faster, growing rapidly like an ice crystal. Light flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. Without a doubt, he had found something incredible. It should be very soon before this thing was fully formed. He also wanted to see what it would look like when it was fully formed. After another 3 days, Ning Chen had searched more than half of the easternmost land. Then, he stopped for the night. He knew that the thing in the depths of the sea of fog would be fully formed tonight. At the end of the world, Mu Bai, who had been sitting quietly, also stood up. Looking at the sea of fog 30 zhang below, his aura slowly awakened. It was like a peerless sharp sword being unsheathed. Even the world lost its color. Ning Chen stood in the distance, looking at Desolate City's unsheathed sword with a stern expression. In the world, if there was someone who had the deepest understanding of the sword, it would definitely be Mu Bai. At this moment, 30 zhang below, the sea of fog rose violently with the sunset. Not long after, it appeared in front of the two again. The sea of fog changed, and lightning descended. Terrifying lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, turning the sea of fog in front of them into a sea of lightning. In the next moment, Mu Bai moved. He only pointed a finger, and in an instant, everything seemed to have stopped. An indescribable sword light appeared. At first, it was very small, but as it moved forward, it became more and more powerful. In the end, it turned into a sword that could cut the sky. With a loud bang, it slashed apart the sea of fog and lightning. In the distance, Ning Chen looked at this shocking sword. He was extremely shocked. Is this the sword? If one hears the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening. The Tao of the sword was so brilliant that it made people intoxicated. In the past, he didn't understand why so many sages spent their lives trying to prove their Tao. Today, after seeing Mu Bai's sword, he understood its endless charm. In the sea of fog that was slashed apart, an apricot tree-like dark gray ice crystal appeared. It was flawless and intoxicating. Ning Chen suppressed his urge to snatch it with great difficulty. His eyes burned as he looked at this unique treasure. In the distance, Mu Bai walked step by step in front of the ice crystal. With a wave of his hand, he scattered it. Ning Chen was stunned. He didn't understand what was going on. Isn't this a wastrel? Wrong again. Mu Bai lightly sighed. He waved his hand and sent the ice crystal back into the sea of fog. He then walked back and waited for the next appearance. Ning Chen found it hard to understand. He looked at Mu Bai and gathered his courage to ask, "Senior Mu Bai, why are you doing this?" Mu Bai indifferently said, "I want to forge a sword, not a tree." Hearing this reply, Ning Chen's heart still ached. He said, "When the sword reaches the pinnacle, can't anything be used as a sword?" Mu Bai looked at him like he was looking at an idiot. He slowly said, "Who taught you such nonsense? A sword is a sword, nothing can replace it." Ning Chen really wanted to say that it was written in the books of his previous life. However, he swallowed his words. There are so many things in the world. How long do you want to wait for a sword to appear? Ning Chen couldn't help but ask. "I don't know." Mu Bai shook his head and said, "Maybe 10 years, maybe 100 years, maybe 1,000 years. There will be a day when it will appear. When the primal chaos took form, there would be a moment when it was at its weakest. This was also the only time to forge a sword. Unfortunately, after several attempts, he still didn't see the sword embryo he wanted." Ning Chen didn't know what to say. This kind of perseverance was truly unique in the world. Sitting here waiting for a sword that might not appear was inconceivable. "Senior Mu Bai, Jr. wants to ask you. Have you seen Ruoshui in the easternmost land?" Ning Chen didn't want to miss this rare opportunity to speak. He hurriedly asked. Mu Bai frowned. He thought for a moment and said, "I think so. It's just that it's been too long and I can't remember where it is." Ning Chen was happy at first, but he was so angry that he wanted to bang his head against the wall. If that was the case, he would have to continue searching aimlessly. The easternmost land was too big. It was connected to the end of the world. It wasn't strange for Ruoshui to appear anywhere. "Senior Mu Bai, have you broken through to the Xiantian realm?" It was already late. It was too late to go out and search. Ning Chen sat at the end of the world and asked the question that the whole world was wondering. "I don't know." Mu Bai calmly said. Ning Chen was helpless. This kind of conversation was very difficult to continue. "Senior Mu Bai, is my sword really that bad? It's unsightly." Mu Bai honestly replied. "Senior Mu Bai, how do your 3 disciples' sword cultivations compare to mine?" Ning Chen asked in boredom. "Other than Jian Yi, the other 2 are about the same as you." Mu Bai replied. "What about Mu Qingxue?" Ning Chen asked. "She doesn't walk the sword Dao. To her, the sword is just a sharp weapon." Mu Bai replied. "Aren't you angry? Everyone has their own Dao. She's not suited to walk the sword Dao. She can't force herself to walk it." That night, Ning Chen asked many questions. Mu Bai was surprisingly patient and answered them one by one. Perhaps it was because he had been lonely for too long, or perhaps he found Ning Chen pleasing to the eye. Ning Chen couldn't say why. In any case, this kind of opportunity would only come once in a lifetime. In truth, his relationship with Desolate City really wasn't that good. Jian Luiying had tried to kill him several times, Jian Er had also fought with him, and even Mu Qingxue was waiting for the day he could kill him. Other than Jian Yi, who he had never met, he had fought with all of Desolate City's successors. "Senior Mu Bai, have you ever hated Great Xia?" Ning Chen calmed down and asked seriously. "Dynasties change. That's unavoidable. Why would I hate it?" Mu Bai asked back. Ning Chen didn't know what to say. Everyone knew this principle, but if it really happened to him, who would be able to accept it? The sun was about to shine down from the east. Ning Chen stood up and walked into the sea of fog. You can't see the light? This was the first time Mu Bai had taken the initiative to ask. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. Do you regret it? Mu Bai calmly asked. No. Ning Chen shook his head. Mu Bai nodded. You have the qualifications to use the sword. After saying that, Mu Bai didn't say anything else. He sat at the end of the world, waiting for the next manifestation to appear. Having obtained permission, Ning Chen began to diligently practice his sword in the sea of fog. With his current body, he was unable to cultivate, so he could only practice his sword. His ink sword's brilliance flashed through the sea of fog. Each move was merciless and cold, bringing with it a sharp killing intent. The surrounding sea of fog was violently tossed and turned by the sword light. Suddenly, Mu Bai raised his hand. Heaven and earth froze. A sword appeared in front of him in an instant. Ning Chen was shocked. He wanted to dodge, but his body didn't listen to him. He was unable to move. The instant the sword touched his body, it completely dissipated. The restrictions on Ning Chen's body disappeared. His heart throbbed and cold sweat poured out. Just now, he had truly felt the aura of death. It had been so close. Many thanks for seniors' pointers. Chapter 204. Ning Chen stood in the middle of the sea of fog, carefully recalling the previous sword strike. Only after experiencing it personally did he know how terrifying it was. He couldn't dodge it, couldn't block it, and didn't even have the chance to react. At that moment, it was as if heaven and earth were frozen, not moving at all. Mu Bai didn't say anything. That sword strike was for Mu Qingxue, and it was also the only thing he could do as an elder. As for how much the young man in front of him could comprehend, it wasn't something he needed to consider. Ning Chen was indeed stumped. For an entire day, his brows were tightly knitted, not relaxing at all. After experiencing that sword strike, Ning Chen could no longer use the ink sword in his hand. He realized that he didn't know how to use a sword anymore. When night fell, the ink sword returned to its scabbard. Ning Chen went to search for traces of Ruo Shui. He didn't know how to use a sword, and carrying this sword would only increase his burden. In the following 3 days, Ning Chen didn't use the ink sword again. He stood in the middle of the sea of fog, recalling that sword strike. His brows were tightly knitted, and he didn't move at all, as if he was possessed. Where did he go wrong? Under the chaotic sea of fog, an even bigger whirlpool was constantly rotating, and something new was forming. However, he didn't know what it was this time. After that night, Mu Bai didn't say a word. He just sat there, quietly waiting. On the 4th day, Ning Chen tried to pull out the ink sword. However, after trying a few times, he still didn't know how to use it. Heaven and earth couldn't be frozen. He had this feeling, without a doubt, it was an illusion. At that moment, he also felt that his body was out of control, as if his spirit and body were separated. It was fast, but not completely. That sword strike was clearly slower than Mu Qingxue's, but he didn't have this feeling when facing Mu Qingxue. Just like the sword strike Mu Bai used to cut open the sea of fog, it was clearly weak at the beginning, but it became stronger, and finally became an unstoppable sword strike. Time passed little by little. When the sun was about to set, Ning Chen, who had been silent all this time, slowly raised the ink sword in his hand. Immediately, the sea of fog began to churn violently. Before the sword was drawn, the sword intent had already taken the lead. A moment later, the sword swept out, and the 3 feet tall sea of fog was instantly separated. Oh! With a light sigh of praise, a hint of approval flashed through Mu Bai's eyes. Although his comprehension was ordinary, his concentration was not bad. After comprehending for so long, he finally managed to make his first strike. The true intent of the sword was fast, accurate, and focused. If one were to purely pursue moves, they would only go further and further. People in this world placed too much emphasis on moves and neglected the essence of the essence. The more complicated the sword move, the more energy it would waste. In the beginning, the true meaning of the sword only existed in this simple thrust. If he couldn't even execute the first sword move properly, it would be equivalent to learning nothing after 100 years of swordsmanship. 3 feet was the length of a sword. It was also the beginning of learning the sword. He had been learning the sword for 40 years, and only then was he able to open up 10,000 feet of primordial chaos. It was already not bad for this child to be able to open up 3 feet on his first strike. He remembered that in the past, Sword 2's first sword opened the barren river, similarly opening up 3 feet. Sword 3 still hadn't done it yet. Only Sword 1's comprehension was the highest, opening up 13 feet on his first sword. Mu Qingxue did not cultivate the way of the sword. However, his talent and comprehension were hard to find in the past and present. With one sword, he cut off the desolate river that was 1,000 feet long. Within the primal chaos fog sea, Ning Chen was naturally unaware of all this. He looked at the ink sword in his hand and fell into deep thought. He seemed to have understood some things, but there were still many things he didn't understand. He could open up 3 feet of primordial chaos, but it was only 3 feet. In front of the sword, he couldn't even open up an inch. On this night, after Ning Chen reached the land, he held his sword and bowed respectfully towards Mu Bai. Senior Mu Bai, this junior has to leave. Once again, thank you for your guidance. Last night, he had already discovered the traces of Ruo Shui. After tonight, regardless of whether he could find the Permitha flower or not, he would not return. Mu Bai did not reply. He had already said what he needed to say in one night. There was nothing else to say. Ning Chen sat on the ghost palanquin and left. He sheathed his ink sword and placed it behind his waist. In the extreme east, there was still a place he had yet to search. Last night, he saw the traces of Ruo Shui flowing through a canyon. However, there wasn't much time left, so he didn't go in to search. The ghost palanquin traveled in the southwest direction. When the bright moon was hanging high in the sky, they arrived at the canyon. There was nothing in the barren canyon. It was a desolate and boundless place. After 100 miles into the canyon, the surroundings became even more barren. There was no life, no sound. There was only an eternal silence. He was so familiar with this scene. It was almost the same as the underworld. It was cold, silent, and lifeless. Under the cliff of the canyon, there were traces of Ruo Shui flowing past. However, the Ruo Shui had already dried up. Ning Chen was puzzled. If this was the source of Ruo Shui, why would it dry up? Ruo Shui was different from ordinary water. It would not evaporate. As long as no one moved it away, it would never disappear. After another 100 miles, the traces left behind by Ruo Shui started to move upwards along the cliff. It extended to a place where the eyes could not see. Ning Chen had no other choice. He could only follow the traces of Ruo Shui and see if he could find the traces of the Permitha flower. The mountain path was rugged and difficult to travel. However, to the ghost palanquin, it didn't have much of an impact. After an hour, a bright red flower suddenly appeared on a rock far away. Under the night sky, it stood alone proudly. Ning Chen's expression became joyful. He rushed forward. Almost at the same time, a familiar figure appeared and rushed forward. When the two of them grabbed the Permitha flower, they looked at each other and immediately sent out a palm strike without hesitation. God's child. Jiming Marquis. The two who were knocked back at the same time were surprised at first, and then boundless battle intent erupted. What an unexpected fate, sighed Jun Shaoqing. No matter what, he had never imagined that the young man he had knocked off a cliff with a single palm strike would cause such a huge commotion. God's child's glory is also unforgettable, said Ning Chen calmly. It could be said that God's child had allowed him to experience the power of a martial arts expert for the first time. After that, thanks to God's child, he had been in a wheelchair for several months. You're also looking for the Permitha flower? Asked Jun Shaoqing. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. The Permitha flower bloomed magnificently on the rock. The two of them were only 10 steps apart, but neither of them dared to move. "If you hand over your birth scroll, I can let you have the Paramitha flower," said Jun Shaoqing slowly. "Do you think that's possible?" asked Ning Chen. The two of them talked calmly without the slightest anger. It was like old friends catching up on old times. However, the conversation would always end. When they met again, the two of them were still enemies. "Since we can't see eye to eye, let's see who's stronger." Jun Shaoqing's expression turned cold. The air pressure around them immediately dropped. A powerful aura surged and spread continuously. Its power was astonishing. Ning Chen's expression also became serious. God's child had been known as the strongest person below the Khanate stage for a long time. Now that they met again, he seemed to be even stronger. He had seen many peak experts below the Khanate stage, such as Underworld Child, Xia Zi, and Mu Qianshang before he stepped into the Khanate stage. Among these people, God's child was undoubtedly the most outstanding. If it wasn't for that woman, God's child might be the strongest Heaven's Reach expert he had ever seen. The black sword behind Ning Chen trembled slightly. The aura around him slowly circulated, and the corresponding pain came with it. Since he couldn't fight for a long time, he would end it quickly. The aura of his sword finger was condensed. Ning Chen's feet moved first. His sword finger broke through the air, drawing a silver flowing light, heading straight for God's child's heart. Jun Shaoqing moved sideways, and the silver flowing light changed direction at the same time. It streaked across, creating a dazzling snowy light. Ning Chen used speed to meet strength, trying not to give Jun Shaoqing a chance to fight back. On his sword finger, the silver brilliance condensed into frost, sprinkling out one sharp killing light after another. Jun Shaoqing moved his feet, avoiding the sword light. At the same time, he gathered Jin Yuan in his palm and sent it out. Finger and palm collided. Ning Chen endured some of his injuries. Sword chi came out of his finger and instantly broke God's child's palm. Jun Shaoqing frowned. He circulated his martial arts and pushed Ning Chen away with a palm. "You shouldn't be so weak," Jun Shaoqing said slowly. The foundation built by the life scroll was unparalleled in the world. But he couldn't feel the absolute power in Ning Chen's moves. In the world, almost all moves were driven by Jin Qi. But Ning Chen gave him the feeling that although his moves were exquisite, they lacked momentum. "Seeing you again, you have disappointed me." As soon as he finished speaking, Jun Shaoqing raised his hand and summoned a change in heaven and earth. Thunder and lightning covered the surroundings. Amidst the raging winds, another world-shaking move appeared. The God's child's hand rumbled with thunder, shaking heaven and earth. Its power was so terrifying that it wanted to tear heaven and earth apart. Dark thunder. Dark thunder appeared again. Heaven and earth shook, and the world turned upside down. Above the canyon, the mountain collapsed. The opportunity had arrived. Behind Ning Chen, the black sword flew out. In an instant, Ning Chen dashed out, grabbing the black sword. 3 feet of forbidden ground, a sword slashed open the heavens. Eh! The sword pierced his heart. Jun Shaoqing grabbed the black sword. Enduring the pain, he used his right hand to forcefully counterattack. Thunder surged, and with a boom, he sent the person in front of him flying. Ning Chen landed on the ground and took a few steps back. He coughed up a mouthful of blood and stabilized himself. Sword chi entered his body. Jun Shaoqing's blood and chi churned violently. He circulated his martial arts and forcibly suppressed the sword chi in his heart. "You've seen Baron City's sword," said Jun Shaoqing hoarsely. "Is that important?" Ning Chen leaned on the sword and said coldly. "I was careless this time. Next time, you won't be so lucky." Jun Shaoqing took a step forward and turned into a beam of light, disappearing into the night. Ning Chen didn't chase after him. Leaning on his sword, he walked step by step to the hurricane lily. He gently plucked it and left on the ghost palanquin. God's child was worthy of being called God's child. If it had been anyone else, they definitely wouldn't have been able to react in time. Jun Shaoqing had been able to grab the black sword at the last moment. This kind of reaction time was rare in the world. Unfortunately, he hadn't been able to get rid of him here. He was very clear that God's child was very close to the Xiantian realm. If he missed this opportunity, the next time they met would be even more difficult. The ghost palanquin was extremely fast. It was different from when it had come. Now, its back was facing the rising sun, so it would have more time. At the end of the world, the first rays of dawn shone on Mu Bai's body. Then, it quickly spread from east to west. The sky and earth began to light up from east to west. The ghost palanquin sped forward, racing against time. In the far east, the dividing line between day and night continued westward. At this moment, it was like the mortal world and hell. It seemed far away, but in reality, it was just inches away. Chapter 205. The first rays of the morning sun traveled to the west, and the ghost palanquin sped along, constantly racing between life and death. The surrounding scenery flashed by in the blink of an eye. The misty forest was right in front of them, and the first rays of the morning sun were getting closer and closer. The next moment, the sun shone on the ghost palanquin, and the heavenly fire descended. The moment the ghost palanquin rushed into the misty forest, flames ignited on Ning Chen's body, and he felt pain beyond his endurance. With a muffled groan, the surrounding blood energy was quickly consumed. The misty forest was strange and difficult to travel through. The ghost palanquin drove along a strange path, passing through layers of fog, and quickly rushed into another world. In the underworld, Ning Chen's body lit up with silver light, suppressing the heavenly fire. He leaned against the rock wall, panting heavily. The dark and quiet underworld was just as silent as ever. Two powerful auras emanated from the depths of the underworld, sending waves after waves of oppressive might that struck fear into the hearts of all who saw it. Ning Chen poured out a handful of pills, stuffed them into his mouth, and closed his eyes to catch his breath. The ghost girl's seclusion this time was longer than he expected. It could be seen how difficult it was to break through to the Xiantian realm. If the ghost girl was here, she could help him suppress the spread of the netherworld poison, but now, he could only rely on himself. He didn't know how effective the spider lily would be, but even if it could cure the poison, he didn't dare to do so. His current life depended on the spider lily. Once the poison was cured, he wouldn't be able to live. Half an hour later, Ning Chen brought the spider lily to another stone room. After closing the door, he didn't come out. Time passed day after day, and the war between Great Xia and Northern Meng was about to reach its final moments. The Northern Meng army heading south was not far from Great Xia's imperial city. In the imperial palace, Xia Mingri had already sent countless dark dragon guards to the misty forest. However, no matter how many people came, there was no news. One could enter the misty forest but not leave. This was the lesson learned for thousands of years, and the dark dragon guards were no exception. Great Xia was in a precarious situation. Compared to the lack of military strength, what was more serious was the fear of the people. More and more people believed that Great Xia would be defeated in this war. The Eternal Night cult in the west regrouped. Martial Monarch's injuries were mostly healed, and he led the cult's heavy cavalry to the east, fiercely clashing with Marquis Triumphant Return's Blackwater army. Everyone knew that whether the world situation would change or not would be revealed soon. However, right at this moment, something unexpected happened to the Northern Meng army. While they were on their way, Fan Lingyue suddenly fell off his horse and fainted. The sudden attack caused the Northern Meng army to panic, and they did not know what to do. Fortunately, when the sun set, Fan Lingyue woke up and reappeared in front of the soldiers, stabilizing their morale. However, from this day onwards, whenever Fan Lingyue went out, he would spend most of his time in a wheelchair, and the number of times he coughed up blood also increased. Fan Lingyue also knew that he didn't have much time left, so he increased the speed of his army heading south again and again, doing everything he could to take down this powerful empire while he was still alive. The dark clouds of war grew increasingly gloomy. The soldiers that could be mobilized within Great Xia had already rushed to the north to assist. However, under the hooves of the Beimeng Iron Cavalry, they quickly fell apart. Fan Lingyue's prestige had reached an unprecedented height. Apart from Great Xia, everyone wanted to see if the Beimeng advisor could create such a miracle. When the invasion became popular, right and wrong no longer seemed important. Great Xia had been invincible for 1,000 years, bringing despair to the world. The situation of people coming from all directions might end soon. In the academy, the dean did not move, and neither did the teacher. It was as if they had never cared about this war. In the Confucian sect's Dragon Garden, Xia Mingri personally came and demanded the 4 palaces of the Confucian sect to send out Confucian experts to serve the empire. The coldness of the emperor was gradually revealed. The 4 palaces of the Confucian sect made him fearful, and he had no choice but to send out 3,000 Confucian disciples to serve the imperial court. The only good news for Great Xia was that the 100,000 reinforcements of the barbarian dynasty were not far from the battlefield in the north after nearly 2 months of trekking. After the defeat of Duke Jingwu and Marquis Bloodrobed, there were less than 70,000 of them left. Apart from the Divine Wind Battalion, which was still intact, the other battalions only existed in name. In Ascension Valley, the atmosphere was getting more and more oppressive. The innate experts who had been in deep slumber were waking up day by day. In order to urge the Realm Master to return to the world, they did not hesitate to consume their remaining lifespan. If there were people from hundreds of years ago here, they would definitely recognize these old monsters who had one foot in the grave. These were all experts of the human world who had disappeared for no reason. Legend had it that some people had passed away, while others had disappeared. Unexpectedly, they were all here. Human nature was so ugly in the face of life and death. The longer one lived, the more they feared death. When faced with the temptation of immortality, they chose to betray without hesitation. The boundary between realms was not so easy to break. In this world, only experts of the 3 disasters realm had the ability to do so. Moreover, it had to be done at the weakest point of the boundary between realms. In Ascension Valley, there was such a place. However, the number of experts of the 3 disasters realm in the Divine Continent could be counted on one hand. Apart from the expert of the 3 disasters realm from the Eternal Night sect who had never appeared and the Buddha who had disappeared after being defeated by Ning Chen, the remaining experts were even fewer. The purpose of Ascension Valley was to occupy the entire Divine Continent, and Great Xia was their primary target. In this way, it was undoubtedly impossible to get Dean Tiansong to help them. The greatest hope of Ascension Valley was only 2 people, the State Preceptor Beimeng and the Eternal Night Martial Monarch. The State Preceptor Beimeng's whereabouts were erratic. In the world, only Fan Lingyue knew about it. However, no one expected Fan Lingyue's attitude to be so unyielding. She used fierce and overbearing methods to kill one and injure the other of the 2 Xiantian emissaries of Ascension Valley. After that, the red-clothed woman also went to invite the martial monarch, but in the end, she also failed. The result was just as Fan Lingyue said. As long as she was still alive, the Eternal Night sect would not dare to agree to this. Seeing that the boundary was about to be broken, but they could not invite the expert of the 3 disasters realm, in the depths of Ascension Valley, terrifying auras were furious. They had waited for hundreds of years for this opportunity. As long as one expert of the 3 disasters realm cooperated with them, they would have the ability to break the boundary of this realm. It was extremely difficult for a second expert of the same realm to appear. They could not afford to wait. Go and kill that military preceptor Beimeng. If 2 people are not enough, send 3 or 4. As long as the Realm Master descends, the immortality you all want will immediately be realized. Yes. On this day, 4 innate experts left Ascension Valley and rushed in the direction of the Beimeng army. In the current situation, as long as they could kill the military preceptor Beimeng, the Eternal Night sect would have no choice but to cooperate with Ascension Valley due to the pressure from Xia. At that time, the appearance of the Realm Master would be unstoppable. In the underworld, Ning Chen sat in a stone room, stuffing elixirs into his mouth. The elixir did not have much effect on the Yellow Springs flower, but it could alleviate the intense pain caused by circulating his vital qi. Ning Chen forcefully activated the luck scroll and continued to cultivate without caring about anything else. Accompanied by the pain and lingering blood mist, the strong Ning Chen almost went berserk because of the pain and distraction. Fortunately, with the help of a large number of elixirs, he managed to hold on. Gradually, the poison of the Yellow Springs flower began to erupt frequently. Every time this happened, Ning Chen would swallow a petal of the red spider lily to suppress the poison of the Yellow Springs flower. The red spider lily and the Yellow Springs flower were mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. Under the effect of the red spider lily, the poison of the Yellow Springs flower, which had always been invincible, began to gradually dissipate. While Ning Chen was surprised, he became even more careful about consuming the red spider lily. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would try his best not to consume it. The poison of the Yellow Springs flower in his body could not be cured, unless he did not want to live anymore. After cultivating again, Ning Chen tried to break through to the innate realm again. When he used that sword in the chaotic sea of fog, he seemed to have touched that barrier. However, when he thought about it carefully, he felt that something was missing. Mu Bai's sword was always able to cross the gap between the innate realm and the acquired realm. It was unstoppable, as if it was never restricted by this barrier. What made him even more confused was that when Mu Bai used that sword to cut through the endless sea of fog, he did not use too much power. In the quiet underworld, the three of them were all in seclusion. Their auras were constantly fluctuating, and even the water in the distance began to sway. As time passed, in the underworld, the third aura became more and more powerful. The sword intent dispersed in all directions, drawing out streaks of sharp marks between the heaven and earth. The ownerless sword intent caused the Zhiga sword to resonate. Rings of sword aura spread out, and similarly affected the figures in seclusion in the stone room. The two strongest swordsmen in the world, Mu Bai and King Yan, one verified the sword, and the other listened to the sword. They used the same sword but had different paths. At this moment, they were competing in different ways, which greatly benefited Ning Chen in the stone room. At the same time, in the Divine Continent, four innate realm experts were rushing towards the Northern Meng army. In the Tiansong Academy, the dean looked at the figures flashing across the horizon. He hesitated for a long time, but still did not make a move. He admitted that he was selfish. Subconsciously, he still did not want to see the Great Xia perish. The military advisor of the Northern Meng was too powerful. In a small courtyard in the academy, the teacher sighed in disappointment. "You should have made a move." The teacher's voice traveled across space. The dean was silent for a moment, and then said slowly, "I'm sorry to disappoint you." The teacher did not say anything else. His old eyes looked in the direction of the Ascension Valley, and a light flashed in them. The change of dynasties was unavoidable since ancient times. For the people of the Divine Continent, there was not much difference who was the master. However, this was on the premise that the Divine Continent was still the master, and not enslaved by other realms. That junior of the Northern Meng, although his methods were a little fierce when he attacked the Great Xia, his treatment of the Ascension Valley had indeed made him look at him in a new light. At such a young age, he had such foresight. It was indeed rare in the world. In the Northern Meng camp, in the commander's tent, Fan Lingyue coughed violently again and again. Blood overflowed from the corners of his mouth, and there was no trace of blood on his pale face. Under the light, he looked so weak. At this moment, waves of extremely powerful forces rapidly approached from afar. They were vast and majestic, and shook one's mind. Fan Lingyue's expression changed slightly. He sat in a wheelchair and walked out of the commander's tent. Looking at the four figures coming from afar, a trace of coldness flashed across his beautiful face. Chapter 206. The auras of the four Xiantian experts combined to form an absolute suppression. Even hundreds of miles away, the northern Meng soldiers felt a stifling pressure that made it hard to breathe. Fan Lingyue got up and waved his hand. Jingye Taichu flew in front of him. His sword was still in its scabbard, but it was already trembling. Military advisor Xiao Wanhua, Qing Wuyo, and the others hurried forward worriedly. Retreat. These people aren't people you can deal with, said Fan Lingyue coldly. Xiao Wanhua, Qing Wuyo, and the others didn't dare to go against the order. Under the lonely night, Fan Lingyue stood alone in front of the camp, waiting for the enemy to quickly approach. The night wind blew, and her blue dress fluttered in the wind. Her hair was like a waterfall, floating in the wind. No one could predict the future battle. The soldiers of northern Meng still trusted their military advisor wholeheartedly. Even if the sky fell, they would not be shaken. Only Xiao Wanhua, whose strength was closest to Xiantian, was worried. The difference between Xiantian and Hotian was unimaginable. No matter how strong the military advisor was, he couldn't deal with 4 Xiantian experts at the same time. The 4 arrived in the blink of an eye. 2 men and 2 women. They didn't look old, but their real ages were frighteningly old. Ancestor. Xiao Wanhua was startled when he saw one of the men. Was he mistaken? The person in front of him was actually the Xiao family's ancestor that he had been fortunate enough to see when he was young. Even after 30 years, he still vaguely remembered the ancestor's appearance. It was exactly the same as the person in front of him. Someone from the Xiao family? What a coincidence, said Xiao Pejuan indifferently as he looked over. Do you have any descendants? Don't be soft-hearted because of this, said the red-clothed woman coldly. Of course. Xiao Pejuan nodded. Fan Lingyue, I'll give you one last chance. As long as you cooperate with Ascension Valley, we'll immediately help you take down Grand Xia. Otherwise, this day next year will be your death anniversary, warned a blue-clothed middle-aged man. It's still the same. Whether we take down Grand Xia or not is my business. Ascension Valley doesn't have the right to decide the future of the Divine Continent, said Fan Lingyue coldly. Xiao Wanhua stepped forward and anxiously asked, Ancestor, how can you help Ascension Valley deal with the military advisor? Impudent. Xiao Pejuan's eyes turned cold, and his aura instantly pushed Xiao Wanhua back dozens of meters. I've long heard of the Xiao clan's defeated army. Now that I've met you today, I'm disappointed, Fan Lingyue said calmly. No matter how eloquent you are, you won't be able to live past tonight. The famous military advisor of Beimeng is nothing more than this. You don't know how to adapt to the situation. You're not worthy of being called the wisest person in the world, the last yellow-clothed woman said sarcastically. There's no point in talking. Come. As soon as he finished speaking, Fan Lingyue took a step forward. Instantly, white light rose up, illuminating the mortal world. Be careful. There's something strange about this white light. It's impervious to all techniques, and it can also consume your true qi. It's very difficult to deal with, the red-clothed woman warned. Are you scared? You're only at the peak of the Hotian realm. How strong can you be? Sneered the yellow-clothed woman. Granny Yen, if you want to die, no one will stop you. The woman in red coldly snorted. Stop arguing. If we can't complete this mission, it won't do anyone any good. The blue-clothed middle-aged man stepped forward and sent out a palm. His vast true qi stirred up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, crashing down. Fan Lingyue slashed out with his sword. White light shone, and his true qi instantly disappeared. The blue-clothed middle-aged man was startled. His body twisted in the air, and he retreated dozens of meters. At the same time, Xiao Pejuan's saber slashed down. It was incomparably domineering. Kata saber. Fan Lingyue narrowed his eyes. He didn't dodge, and his slender hand grabbed the edge of the Kata saber. The ancient overlord Rahu's saber had the ability to cut through the heavens. He hadn't expected it to be in Xiao Pejuan's hands. White light spread out from the Kata saber like moonlight. Xiao Pejuan felt his true qi quickly leak out. Sword in palm. The red-clothed woman rushed forward and activated her palm energy, trying to rescue Wei from Zhao. Fan Lingyue let go of the Kata saber and leaned to the side. His sword slashed out, creating a brilliant killing light. The red-clothed woman retreated quickly, unwilling to come into contact with the saber. In the blink of an eye, the three of them had already attacked for a round. The three innate masters joined forces, but they couldn't gain the upper hand. The yellow-clothed woman was shocked. How could a peak postnatal master be so strong? Attack together, or no one will be able to return tonight. The red-clothed woman warned again. This time, the yellow-clothed woman didn't refute. She clenched her right hand, and a sharp ancient sword appeared. The sword was cold and piercing. The four of them surrounded and attacked together. Their powerful aura covered the sky and earth, suppressing everything. The battle of the 5 strongest cultivators was 4 against 1. In front of the northern Meng army, everything collapsed, and the earth was devastated. The white light around Fan Lingyue rose to the extreme, raising his combat power to the extreme. White light covered the heaven and earth. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, dripping on his blue dress. Fan Lingyue's body couldn't bear the full release of his strength for a long time, and he started to show signs of exhaustion. In the Tiansong Academy, the teacher turned into the noble Confucian Qi and opened the sky-expanding plate. Everything in the void rotated, revealing the secrets of heaven and earth. After a long time, the teacher stopped. He looked in the direction of the distant misty forest and said, "Ning Chen, come to the academy immediately." In the netherworld, Ning Chen, who had been in seclusion for a long time, suddenly opened his eyes. The sword wool around him retracted, and he stood up and disappeared in a flash. The next moment, the ghost sedan sped towards the academy. In less than an hour, the ghost sedan arrived at the academy. Ning Chen got off the sedan, and his figure flashed past, arriving at the teacher's courtyard. "Teacher." Ning Chen bowed respectfully and greeted. "There's one thing I want to tell you," the teacher said slowly. "Teacher, please speak," Ning Chen said respectfully. The teacher briefly told him about the Ascension Valley. After that, he said calmly, "You decide what to do." Ning Chen didn't say anything. He summoned the ghost sedan and quickly went north. The teacher nodded, and a touch of relief flashed through his old eyes. These two young juniors were much more clear-headed than most people in the world. Not far away, the dean was silent. He didn't expect his tolerance to be worse than a young man. He really couldn't help the military advisor of Northern Meng. Although he had entered the 3 disasters, he still couldn't ignore the rise and fall of Great Xia. He hoped that the Master of Divine Prefecture would be Great Xia, not Northern Meng. The ghost sedan sped up. In the sedan, Ning Chen took out the red spider lily, bit off a petal, and swallowed it. The battle later would definitely be extremely tragic. If the poison broke out at that time, he wouldn't even have the chance to take the red spider lily. He didn't expect that the first battle after coming out of seclusion would be to help Fan Lingyue. He wanted to give her a surprise, but now, Fan Lingyue gave him a surprise. In front of the Northern Meng army, the battle was getting more and more intense. Fan Lingyue, who was fighting with all her strength, was as brilliant as the moon in the sky, illuminating the whole world. 1 against 4, a battle that surpassed the innate stage and the acquired stage. The 4 were shocked. There was actually such a terrifying person in the world. However, no matter how strong Fan Lingyue was, facing the siege of 4 innate stage experts, she finally showed signs of fatigue. While she swung her sword to repel the attacks of 3 people, a palm strike came from behind. The white light couldn't dissipate in time, and the 3rd layer of the martial arts was activated. Blood dyed the sky. Military advisor Qing Wuyo, Xiao Wanhua, and the other generals were shocked. They immediately went forward to help. "Back down!" Fan Lingyue shouted coldly and ordered. Qing Wuyo and the others paused. They didn't dare to disobey the military orders that had been accumulated for a long time. They retreated step by step. Fan Lingyue, you have won the respect of Xiao Pejuan. Next move, I will take your life. After saying that, Xiao Pejuan raised the Kata saber. The saber light soared into the sky, drawing a long bloody scar. The terrifying power shook the 9 heavens. Seeing this, the other 3 people raised their martial arts and coordinated their moves, wanting to end the life of the woman in front of them in one move. However, at this moment, a black sword appeared. Xiao Pejuan, who was focused on his move, couldn't react in time. While dodging with all his strength, the sword still pierced through his right chest. What a pity! Ning Chen pulled out the black sword. His figure flashed and appeared in front of Fan Lingyue. There was some regret on his face. He originally wanted to pierce through the heart in the left chest. The sudden change shocked everyone. Xiao Pejuan, who was injured by the black sword, immediately used his true qi to stop the bleeding. The other 3 also focused. Facing an unfamiliar expert who suddenly appeared, they didn't dare to be careless. It's you. Fan Lingyue coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood. Are you surprised? I also didn't think that there would be a day when we would work together. However, can you still fight? Ning Chen asked calmly. Endless fighting spirit. Fan Lingyue wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said slowly. That's good. Tonight, there is no difference between Great Xia and Northern Meng. Let's clean up these traitors of the Divine Prefecture first. What I hate the most in my life are traitors. Ning Chen looked at the 4 people in front of him and said with killing intent. What is a traitor? Fan Lingyue asked. The language of my hometown. You won't understand even if I tell you, Ning Chen replied. Ha! Fan Lingyue smiled faintly and said, then you don't have to say it. However, can your body take it? Don't drag me down. This is also what I want to tell you. Ning Chen replied and took a step forward. Sword intent appeared around him. A strange look flashed across Fan Lingyue's eyes. He was indeed different. Looks like you are about to step into the Xiantian realm too, Fan Lingyue said calmly as he released a white light. Just like you, I don't dare to take that step. Ning Chen moved, and the black sword split open the sky. An unparalleled sword intent directly crossed the boundary between the Xiantian realm and the Hotian realm and swept toward Xiao Pejuan and the yellow-clothed woman. The 2 of them were shocked. The Kata saber and ancient edge cooperated and collided with the heaven-splitting sword. A shocking explosion sounded. The blood and qi in the 2 of them were affected by the terrifying sword intent and surged violently. A single sword against 2 edges. The moment the battle started, it was a matter of life and death. On the other side, with 2 less opponents, Fan Lingyue immediately felt the pressure on him decrease greatly. He released the absolute beginning of pure karma, and the white light was cold and dazzling. The red-clothed woman and the blue-clothed middle-aged man joined forces to fight, and the battle was also extremely intense. Yesterday's opponents, today's comrade in arms. Facing the invasion of the outer realm, the 2 of them temporarily put down their positions without reservation and fought with all their strength. Chapter 207. 2 against 4, Hotian against Xiantian. The originally unequal battle was forcibly narrowed by the 2's sharp swords. Sword against sword, palm against palm, silhouette against silhouette, the battlefield changed several times. The splattered blood dripped onto the ground, dyeing it red. The white light turned into the myriad laws of heaven and earth, blocking most of the attacks. Ning Chen, with his sword in hand, had an unstoppable sword will. His attack was extremely terrifying, bearing most of the attacks. The most perfect cooperation, without any rehearsal. The 2 people who were the most familiar with each other in the world had demonstrated what trust and tacit understanding were tonight. Perhaps after this battle, the 2 of them would still be enemies, but at this moment, they were comrades in arms who had gone through life and death together. The 4 of them became more and more shocked as they fought. They couldn't break the white light, nor could they block the black sword. Suddenly, Fan Lingyue couldn't take it anymore. He staggered and vomited blood, dyeing the blue clothes in front of him red. A flaw suddenly appeared in the white light, and the woman in red seized the opportunity. She stepped forward and sent a palm strike. The black sword in Ning Chen's hand pushed away the two people in front of him. His figure flashed quickly, and his left hand turned over to meet the attack. There was a shocking explosion. Ning Chen took a few steps back, the corners of his mouth stained with ink. He waved his sword and slashed out again. The woman in red was blocked by the sword light. She could only temporarily dodge the attack. In a head-on clash of cultivation, Ning Chen was undoubtedly at a disadvantage and suffered heavy injuries. At this point in the battle, the six of them were all injured. Ning Chen had the immortal body, so he was fine for the time being. But Fan Lingyue's sick body couldn't hold on for long. Blood kept flowing from his mouth, and he could collapse at any time. No matter how brave the sword was, it couldn't withstand the attacks of 4 Xiantian experts. The fact that the two of them could fight to this extent had already surpassed the limit of heaven's reach. Can you still hold on? Ning Chen stood in front of Fan Lingyue and asked seriously. It's okay, I can still fight. Fan Lingyue struggled to stand firm and said slowly. It's good that you can hold on. I can't fight 4 people alone. Ning Chen said. Fan Lingyue suppressed his sick body. The white light spread out, once again enveloping a 10-meter radius. The 4 of them took turns to fight, 2 attacking and 2 defending. Ji Du and Gu Feng, with their Xiantian power, suppressed the enemy and shook the heaven and earth. Ning Chen focused 90% of his attention on offense and 10% on defense. His black sword was simple and unassuming, but it made the 4 of them feel a murderous aura that threatened their lives. In Fan Lingyue's hands, the pure night absolute beginning transformed into a continuous sword move. It was a soft and continuous move, white light lingering around it. The moment it came into contact with it, the opponent's true chi instantly dissipated. The 2 swords worked together to resist the strong enemy, one sword out, the other back, the head and the tail working together. There was no flaw to be found. In the distance, the northern Meng soldiers looked at the 6 figures crisscrossing each other on the battlefield. They were shocked beyond words. So, a battle could be like this. The 2 sword wills were connected. They did not communicate with words, nor did they use their eyes to signal each other. They only relied on their hearts to make their moves. Both of them had entered the realm of sword breath. Their murderous aura was intimidating. Prince Yen once said that Ning Chen had too many things on his mind and his sword heart was not calm. It was unlikely that he would be able to feel the breath of the sword in his entire life. Fan Lingyue was the same. The 2 of them were so similar and had too many concerns. It was almost impossible for them to feel the sword aura. However, nothing was absolute. At the moment of life and death tonight, the 2 of them had no choice but to trust each other wholeheartedly. They trusted each other and also trusted the swords in their hands. The 2 of them used the same sword aura. Feeling the other's sword, their own swords followed suit. 2 swords, 2 hearts, breathing and thinking at the same time. There was no difference anymore. Ji Du's blade slashed over, the white light dissipating most of the attack. Fan Lingyue's sword light met it. At the moment of collision, Ji Du's might was reduced by another 30%. The ink sword swept past. Xiao Pejuan withdrew his blade to block, but he felt a surge of sword will penetrate the blade and enter his body. With a bang, Xiao Pejuan flew out, his mouth dyed red again. How are you? The yellow-clothed woman's body flashed and she waved her hand to support him. I'm fine. Xiao Pejuan steadied himself and wiped off the blood on his face. His expression was cold. The 4 of them attacked again. The pure night absolute beginning grabbed a gentle sword force. His true chi poured out from his palms and on the blade. Ning Chen arrived at the same time. The ink sword landed and the sword moved at will, slashing out a brilliant light. The yellow-clothed woman took the sword head-on. The sword flashed with cold light, once again pressing towards her life. Fan Lingyue's left hand flickered with light. With a clang, the ancient sword was pushed away. Immediately after, his palm struck out towards the attacking red-clothed woman. Closely pressed, without any time to breathe, Ji Du soared through the sky, shaking the heavens and earth. At this moment, Fan Lingyue's palm shifted. Ignoring the attacking woman, he turned his palm to block the blade light. The ground beneath his feet instantly cracked. The red-clothed woman pressed forward. Her ink sword appeared at the same time. Snowflakes drifted down. One sword opened 100 feet in the sky. The red-clothed woman flew out. Her body was greatly shaken, blood splattering across the horizon. The night wind blew past. The smell of blood spread everywhere. The bloody night was peerlessly shocking. The 4 Xiantian experts fought in a sorry state. They fought in humiliation. They once looked down on the world, but today, they were forced into a corner by 2 juniors. Don't drag it out anymore. Let's end this quickly. The blue-clothed man said coldly. The other 3 nodded. Their true chi rose rapidly. They used their extreme techniques, wanting to forcefully break apart the two's cooperation. A terrifying pressure spread out. The ground cracked. Large pieces of debris rose up and then fell down with a bang. The strength of the Xiantian experts was fully displayed at this moment. The northern Meng soldiers who were slightly closer were unable to retreat in time. They were directly shattered into pieces by this terrifying power. At this critical moment, Fan Lingyue turned his palm. White light soared into the sky. The scroll of moon technique appeared in the world again. At the same time, Ning Chen's body flashed and appeared behind the former. His sword finger condensed frost. He used the scroll of life and poured his true chi into the latter's body. Scroll of moon, silent moonfall. Fan Lingyue condensed the two's techniques. The scroll of moon was pushed to the extreme. The divine moon shone and white light quickly spread out. The heavenly technique appeared in the world. In an instant, moonlight descended and the world was silent. It was as if the world had frozen. The 4 figures suddenly stopped moving. Ning Chen and Fan Lingyue rushed out. Their swords slashed across and the yellow-clothed woman's throat. The powerful sword intent destroyed the woman's life force. It chased after her soul and took her life. On the other side, Fan Lingyue swung his sword to kill Xiao Pejuan. However, he didn't expect Xiao Pejuan to break free at the last moment and meet him with his sword. With a loud bang, the 2 retreated more than 10 steps. Their bodies were dyed red. Retreat! The blue-clothed middle-aged man who came back to his senses saw that the situation was not right and ordered a retreat. Xiao Pejuan and the red-clothed woman retreated without hesitation. They disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. After the 3 retreated, Fan Lingyue staggered and vomited a mouthful of blood, which spilled on the yellow soil. Ning Chen withdrew his sword and looked at the woman in front of him with a complicated expression. The feeling of the sword aura dissipated in the blink of an eye. At this moment, he couldn't feel it at all. The enemy retreated. The 2 were still enemies and not friends. Killing intent overflowed and the atmosphere became extremely strange. Qing Wuyo and the others who had just breathed a sigh of relief immediately became alert again. They were ready to help at any time. In the end, the 2 didn't make a move. Now, neither of them had the confidence to kill the other. Moreover, the Ascension Valley was about to appear. This made the 2 more apprehensive. Fan Lingyue, retreat, Ning Chen advised again. Impossible. Fan Lingyue refused without hesitation. There was no room for negotiation. Ning Chen sighed softly. He knew the answer would be like this, but he still couldn't calm down and asked again. How do you plan to deal with the Ascension Valley? Ning Chen changed the topic. They need the help of 3 calamities. The Martial Lord is the only candidate. However, as long as I'm alive, the Eternal Night Cult won't have the guts, Fan Lingyue said coldly. How long can you last? 1 month? 2 months? Why are you so stubborn? Ning Chen sighed. There's no need to say more. What you should do now is to pray that the Great Xia can last these 2 months. As for the Ascension Valley, I have my own plans, Fan Lingyue said calmly. Marquis Xiao, send the guest off. Yes. Xiao Wanhua walked forward and politely bowed. Jiming Marquis, please. Ning Chen sighed inwardly. He waved his hand to summon the ghost palanquin and walked in. Fan Lingyue, I will definitely do my best to stop you. The final words echoed in front of the Beimeng formation. The ghost palanquin quickly left and soon disappeared. I hope you have the ability to do so. Fan Lingyue turned around and returned to her tent, leaving behind a land riddled with holes. Dust rose in the night wind and didn't settle for a long time. In the Netherworld Palace, Ning Chen looked at the stone room sealed by layers of restrictions. A lonely light flashed through his eyes. He might not be able to wait for her to recover her memories. Before the Xiantian realm, Fan Lingyue hadn't taken the final step, and neither had he. It wasn't that he couldn't, but that he didn't dare. If he took this step, he would die. Or perhaps, Fan Lingyue was still half a step away. Because she had the Chaos Scroll, she could take that extra step. Just now, in the moment of one heart and breath, he saw the Chaos Scroll and that surging and vast true qi. A martial artist's realm couldn't be suppressed for a long time. However, the Chaos Scroll could conceal heaven's secrets, so Fan Lingyue was able to forcibly suppress her realm. In the past, he was very far away from the Xiantian realm. He always thought that there would be a day when he could break through. Now, he was so close, but he didn't dare to take that step. This step wasn't as easy as he imagined. The danger within it could only be felt when it was within reach. Only now did he understand why Fan Lingyue had never taken this step. With the killing karma she had created and the endurance of her body, as long as she took that step, she would definitely die. Now that it was his turn to make the decision, he couldn't take that step either. 300 miles away from the imperial city of Great Xia, the light cavalry of Great Xia, who had been training in camp, left their camp and headed north, making their final effort for this war. The leader of the army was Xia Zi. This prince of Great Xia who came from the Confucian sect had finally abandoned his benevolence. He put on his battle armor and headed north. When the night fell, Ning Chen came. After a long time, the two of them met again. The 30,000 light cavalry carried the heavy responsibility of eliminating the northern Meng heavy cavalry. They had endured for a long time, all for this upcoming battle. This was the final moment of Great Xia's counterattack. They couldn't afford to fail. Are we not waiting for the barbarian dynasty's reinforcements? Xia Zi asked solemnly. No. Ning Chen shook his head and continued, we can't afford to lose this battle. After all, the barbarian dynasty's reinforcements aren't under the command of Great Xia. Once there's a disagreement, our preparations will go to waste. Xia Zi nodded. The war of Great Xia ultimately depended on Great Xia itself. This was the most crucial battle. No matter what, they had to win. Chapter 208. The 30,000 cavalrymen heading north hurried through the night. They had already set off 2 days earlier to make ample preparations for this war. Of the 30,000 cavalrymen, about 5,000 of them wore armor that was different from the others. It wasn't as heavy as the northern Meng heavy cavalry, but it was heavier than the light cavalry. These were the heavy cavalry of Great Xia. Although there weren't many of them, they had a very important battle strategy. When the 30,000 cavalrymen headed north, the 70,000 imperial guards under Duke Jingwu also headed south. The two armies chased after each other, surrounding the northern Meng army. 4 days later, the Great Xia imperial guards finally caught up to the northern Meng army. The two armies were so close that the battle could erupt at any moment. The atmosphere of war shrouded the two armies as Great Xia attacked from both sides, forcing the northern Meng army to deal with it. In the northern Meng camp, Fan Lingyue was sitting in the commander's tent, looking at the reports sent by his scouts. Great Xia lacked horses, so cavalry wasn't their main force. Their combat strength was much weaker than the northern Meng cavalry. In a direct confrontation, 10,000 northern Meng cavalry was enough to deal with 20,000 Great Xia cavalry. Now, the 70,000 imperial guards behind the northern Meng army posed a greater threat. The Divine Wind Battalion was still intact, and their combat strength couldn't be underestimated. Military advisor, the commander of the Great Xia cavalry is Xia Zi. His talent isn't inferior to anyone else, and he can step into the Xiantian realm at any time. We have to be careful, Xiao Wanhua said. You deal with him. I'll deal with Duke Jingwu personally, Fan Lingyue said calmly. Yes, Xiao Wanhua said respectfully. In King Haowu's camp, Xia Zi walked out of the commander's tent and looked at the northern Meng army in the distance with a grave expression. Now, Ning Chen had to think of a way to separate the northern Meng cavalry from the other 60,000 cavalrymen. The Great Xia cavalry wasn't a match for the northern Meng cavalry in a direct confrontation. In the Imperial Guard camp, Duke Jingwu, Marquis Bloodclad, and Ning Chen had been discussing in the tent for most of the night. Ning Chen only left when the sky was about to brighten. Beat the drums, attack! Once the sky brightened, the 30,000 Imperial Guards of the Divine Wind Battalion advanced in formation, with the remaining 40,000 following closely behind, ready to reinforce at any time. Marquis Blood-clad Marquis and the three commanders of the Divine Wind Battalion took the lead in fighting against Qing Wuyo and several generals of northern Meng. Marquis Blood-robed's battle prowess was unparalleled, suppressing everyone. The four swords fought, focusing on defense, barely holding back the martial Marquis of Xia. The elites of the Divine Wind Battalion were all sent out. On the contrary, Bei Meng was more conservative. 8,000 heavy cavalry soldiers just watched and did not participate in the battle. On the first day of probing, both armies suffered casualties. However, the casualties were not large. When the sun set, both armies retreated and peace was restored. When night fell, the Great Xia cavalry on the other side suddenly attacked the camp of the Bei Meng heavy cavalry. Xiao Wanhua reacted quickly and immediately sent light cavalry and infantry to meet the enemy head-on, covering the heavy cavalry that had already taken off their armor. The Great Xia cavalry attacked for a wave, and after seeing that they did not gain anything, they immediately retreated. Ning Chen stood in the distance and looked at the retreating Great Xia cavalry. His expression was calm and he didn't look disappointed. Not gaining anything tonight was a normal situation. With Fan Lingyue's intellect, how would he not be wary of Great Xia's sneak attacks? The advantage of heavy cavalry was that they could forcefully break through formations. In a head-on clash, they were invincible. However, they also had their own weaknesses. One of them was that the heavy armor could not be worn by the soldiers and the war horses. If not, both the soldiers and the war horses would not be able to take it. Wearing the armor before the battle and taking it off after the battle was an essential part of the heavy cavalry. However, the armor of the heavy cavalry was abnormally heavy and complicated to wear. Every time they wore the armor, they had to spend a lot of time taking it off. It was impossible for them to get on their horses and fight at any time like the light cavalry. Hence, when they were not fighting, the heavy cavalry would not be of any use. As for the other weaknesses of the heavy cavalry, it would depend on whether the Bei Meng heavy cavalry would make mistakes in the following battle. Xia Zi walked over and said, "Let's go." And Ning Chen nodded and left with the former. On the second day, the Divine Wind Battalion and the remaining 40,000 guards continued to attack. On the other side, 30,000 Great Xia cavalry were waiting to tie down the enemy. Fan Lingyue sat at the front of the formation and commanded the army to fight. As for the Great Xia cavalry, they temporarily gave full power to Xiao Wanhua. On this day, the heavy cavalry struck out and clashed with the Divine Wind Battalion. The two sides clashed head-on, and both sides suffered casualties. The heavy cavalry lost 400 cavalry and the Divine Wind Battalion lost 2,000 soldiers. On the other side, without the threat of the heavy cavalry, the 5,000 heavy cavalry of Great Xia were fearless. They carried their specially made spears and attacked several times, causing the Beimeng cavalry to be in a bad state. Although the Great Xia heavy cavalry was not as strong as the Beimeng heavy cavalry, they still had a huge advantage against the Beimeng light cavalry. At night, the Great Xia light cavalry attacked once more. Their target was still the camp of the Beimeng heavy cavalry. After meeting resistance, they immediately retreated without hesitation. On the third day, the same situation happened once more. As long as the Beimeng heavy cavalry went to deal with the Divine Wind Battalion, the Great Xia heavy cavalry would appear and disrupt the situation. Helplessly, Xiao Wanhua could only send someone to ask Fan Lingyue to temporarily move the heavy cavalry to deal with the 30,000 cavalry of Great Xia. After Fan Lingyue received the report, he agreed and moved the heavy cavalry over. However, he ordered that no matter what the situation was, the heavy cavalry could not move alone and had to be covered by the light cavalry. In the next 2 days, the attacks of the Great Xia guards came wave after wave, never stopping. On the other side, after the Beimeng heavy cavalry moved over, the Great Xia cavalry calmed down a lot. However, the attack at night was still the same and did not stop for a single night. The Beimeng heavy cavalry was annoyed. Sometimes, just as they took off their heavy armor, the Great Xia light cavalry would sneak up on them. They had no choice but to put it back on. Just as they were about to fight, the Great Xia cavalry would quickly retreat. During wartime, the situation could change in an instant. Fan Lingyue knew the importance of improvising, so she placed all her attention on the Great Xia guards. On the other side, the Great Xia cavalry was relatively weak, and she believed that Xiao Wanhua could temporarily deal with them. This time, the surprise that she gave Great Xia had arrived in time. On the night of the 6th day, a figure covered in black cloth appeared in the Beimeng commander tent. Fan Lingyue sat on a wheelchair, and a cold smile appeared on his face. "Abbot, how have you been?" "Amit Ba." With a loud Buddhist chant, the black cloth suddenly exploded, revealing the Buddha who had disappeared for a long time, the abbot of Du Yi Temple. On the other side of the Beimeng army, in King Haowu's camp, 3,000 Confucian disciples appeared at the same time. This was the first time Ning Chen saw a Confucian abbot, and his first impression was very ordinary. Or rather, his impression of the entire Confucian sect was very ordinary. He respected his teacher, but that did not mean he had a good impression of the Confucian sect. The current Confucian sect had long forgotten the original reason why his teacher had founded it. His teacher had founded it to educate the people, not to let them rely on it to fight for power. The Confucians in the imperial court had done a lot for him to be cursed. He did not respond because he did not have the energy to deal with them. Xia Zi also knew that Ning Chen did not like the Confucian sect, so he wanted to ease the relationship between Ning Chen and the Confucian sect. "Ning Chen, this is the abbot's abbot. Your sword is cultivated by the abbot. Many thanks." Ning Chen cupped his fists and bowed, maintaining a polite appearance. "I've long since heard of the Jiming Marquis' name. Now that I've met you, you truly are a young hero," said the abbot politely. "You praise me too much." Ning Chen did not say anything else. This abbot clearly was not a simple person. Things were different now, and he no longer had the energy to feign civility. Xia Zi sighed inside, knowing that he could not force him. He brought the abbot out of the tent and arranged a place for him to rest. "Jiming Marquis, a few days ago, Prince Yen and a girl called Wild came to the Confucian sect. That girl seemed to be looking for you," said the abbot as he was about to leave. Ning Chen trembled, his heart no longer calm. Why had that silly girl run out again? If his senior knew that he was in the underworld, then Wild should also know. Why hadn't Wild come? Ning Chen's mind was filled with countless thoughts. The more he thought about it, the more he didn't understand. From ancient times until now, a woman's thoughts were not something a man could guess. No matter how smart a man was, no matter how simple a woman was. Far away in the wilderness, two figures were slowly moving forward, one in front and one behind. The woman in the back was wearing a beautiful dress, carrying an ancient sword rack on her back. On the rack, there were 4 swords, 3 of which belonged to her seniors, and 1 of which belonged to her. "Senior, let's rest for a bit," said Wild. She was unable to walk any further. "All right." Prince Yen responded softly and stopped in his tracks. Wild was not a spoiled brat. She found a rock and sat down. She took out 2 pears from her bag and gave one to her senior while eating the other. Prince Yen smiled and took the pear. He softly said, "Wild, do you want to learn the sword?" "I don't want to." Wild took a bite of the pear and straightforwardly replied. "Ugh." Prince Yen chuckled. Those who wanted to teach didn't want to learn, and those who wanted to learn couldn't learn. If Ning Chen had half of this girl's power of understanding, he would have entered the innate stage long ago. "Senior, where are we going?" asked Wild. "The Far East," Prince Yen replied. "Why are we going there?" asked Wild curiously. "Tribulation transcendence," said Prince Yen calmly. After transcending the last tribulation at the 5th tribulation realm, one would trigger the taboo of the 3 calamities at any time. If the first calamity appeared, it might implicate the innocent. He didn't want to take the risk. In this world, there were only 5 people who had reached the 3 calamities realm. However, every one of them had brought about considerable calamities to the world after transcending the first calamity. The strength of the 3 calamities realm was built on the sacrifice of the innocent. Wild wasn't interested in cultivation. She chewed on her pear and thought about what a certain person was doing now. "Senior, I miss him," whispered Wild softly as she felt depressed for no reason. Prince Yen sighed inwardly and said softly, "When we return from the Far East, I'll bring you to find him, all right?" "All right." Wild nodded obediently. A beautiful smile bloomed on her pretty face like a blooming flower. It was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. Chapter 209. At dawn, before the sky was completely bright, the Beimeng heavy cavalry were woken up by the sound of galloping horse hooves. Attacking twice in one night, the heavy cavalry soldiers could not suppress their anger. Great Xia's actions were really despicable. Beimeng was prepared, and their infantry and light cavalry quickly got into formation to defend against the Great Xia cavalry. Such a scene had happened many times, and Beimeng was used to defending against the Great Xia cavalry. They did not dare to be careless at all. However, this time, the Beimeng army realized that Great Xia did not send the light cavalry. Instead, they were fully equipped heavy cavalry. The moment both sides clashed, the Beimeng army that was not prepared fell into a passive state. After the Great Xia heavy cavalry, the light cavalry followed closely behind, charging wave after wave at the Beimeng defensive line. The battle was abnormally intense, and the Beimeng army quickly gathered up to deal with the attacks of the Great Xia cavalry. On the other side, the Great Xia Guards Legion Corps also launched their attacks. The Divine Wind Unit attacked at all costs, trying their best to delay the Beimeng cavalry. On the 2 battlefields, the 4 commanders all had different thoughts as they calmly looked on at the cruelty of the battle. The Beimeng army was split into 2, and they faced the attacks of Great Xia on different battlefields. This battle quickly reached its climax in the morning. An hour later, the Beimeng heavy cavalry finished their preparations and got into formation. Qing Wuyo held his halberd and stood in front of the formation. He raised his halberd and gave the order to charge out. The rumbling of molten iron flood was unstoppable, and the Great Xia cavalry could not block it. Not long later, they were at a disadvantage. Retreat! Under Xia Zi's order, the Great Xia light cavalry quickly retreated, and the heavy cavalry followed closely behind in an orderly fashion. The Beimeng heavy cavalry followed closely behind, venting their anger. Anyone who was disturbed day and night would find it hard to remain calm. Xiao Wanhua observed the situation, and a cold glow flashed in his eyes. With all the great Xia cavalry out, there would be no more ambushes. Today was a chance. Great Xia's distraction tactic was hard to defend against, and he could not passively defend. If not, once Great Xia succeeded, it would be too late to regret it. In a head-on clash, the combat strength of the Beimeng heavy cavalry was invincible. He wanted to make use of this chance to crush all of Great Xia's resistance. Chase! With a single order, the Northern Meng heavy cavalry charged out in full force, their armor clanging as they chased after them. The fish has finally taken the bait. After they were far away from Northern Meng's camp, Xia Zi waved his hand and ordered the light cavalry to spread out. The heavy cavalry faced the heavy cavalry and prepared for a decisive battle. The mocking look in Qing Wuyo's eyes was extremely clear. The heavy cavalry of Great Xia could deal with normal light cavalry, but going head-to-head with the heavy cavalry of Beimeng was like hitting a rock with an egg. Behind them, Beimeng's 10,000 light cavalry were on standby, ready to reap the rewards of the battle. Xiao Wanhua remembered Fan Lingyue's order and did not let the heavy cavalry attack alone, sending light cavalry to cover them at all times. The battle between the two armies was about to break out at any moment. Beimeng's heavy cavalry swiftly charged forward, followed by the 10,000 light cavalry as cover. Retreat! The battle went on for an hour, and Great Xia was once again at a disadvantage. Xia Zi came down, and the Great Xia cavalry retreated once again. Just like that, the Great Xia cavalry fought as they retreated, moving the Beimeng heavy cavalry and 10,000 light cavalry far away from the Beimeng camp. Xiao Wanhua gradually felt that something was amiss. At this moment, a scout rushed over from the distance and quickly reporting to the Marquis, someone is attacking the camp. Luring the tiger away from the mountain. Xiao Wanhua's face turned cold, and he said coldly, "How many?" "Around 5,000 cavalry," the scout replied. "Retreat." Xiao Wanhua observed the situation and ordered. The Beimeng army received the order and swiftly retreated like a flood. The back of the formation was the front of the formation. The light cavalry were faster, and they were led by Xiao Wanhua to reinforce the camp. In front of the Great Xia cavalry formation, Xia Zi acted at the same time and said, "Chase." The order was sent out, and the light cavalry that were spread out went around to stop the Beimeng heavy cavalry from coming back. In the distance, the Beimeng camp was ablaze, and one could see the eye-catching flames from far away. Time was of the essence, and Xiao Wanhua made the decision to order the personal guards beside him, "Send my order to Qing Wuyo. I'll bring the light cavalry back first. Tell him to stop fighting and quickly catch up." "Yes." The personal guards received the order and swiftly rode away. After the Great Xia light cavalry blocked the Beimeng heavy cavalry, the Great Xia heavy cavalry at the back charged forward at the same time, stopping the Beimeng heavy cavalry at all costs. "General Qing, Marquis Xiao orders you to quickly catch up and stop fighting," Xiao Wanhua's personal guards ordered. "It's too late. None of you can retreat today." Before his words landed, a young man appeared, holding Mechi autumn water and blocking in front of Qing Wuyo. He abandoned the benevolent Xia Zi and charged over with killing intent. With one sword, he killed 13 enemy cavalry, causing blood and flesh to fly. The invulnerable Beimeng cavalry were like paper, sliced apart by Mechi autumn water. Shameless boasting. Qing Wuyo could not hide his anger, and he charged forward, waving his halberd and chopping down. As the sword and halberd clashed, the wind howled. The war horse could not withstand the huge force and knelt down on the ground. At the same time, numerous generals charged up and surrounded the newcomer. Xia Zi was not afraid at all. One man and one sword, he suppressed everyone. The galloping war horses passed by everyone, and the two sides clashed once more. This time, the formation of the Great Xia cavalry suddenly changed. They lined up into 5 horizontal lines, and each horizontal line was in a single file. The distance between each horizontal line was very wide, forming a front that was much wider than the Northern Meng heavy cavalry. The first two horizontal lines were the Great Xia heavy cavalry, while the other three were the light cavalry. Apart from this, there were many other light cavalry that were doing seemingly meaningless movements on both sides. After the two sides engaged in battle, the Great Xia light cavalry immediately charged out from the huge gap between the front row of heavy cavalry and shot wave after wave with the specially made god-arm crossbows. After a few shots, the Great Xia heavy cavalry quickly retreated. In the battle, Xia Zi's sword pushed away Qing Wuyo and the four generals. Looking at the two armies in the final battle, his eyes were cold. They had prepared for this battle for a long time, and they would not allow any accidents to happen. Within the Netherworld House, Ning Chen looked toward the north. He was also worried about this crucial battle. The biggest advantage of the heavy cavalry was their unparalleled ability to break formations. In the era of cold weapons, the integrity of the formation was the crux of the battle. Whether it was the Great Xia or the Northern Meng heavy cavalry, it was equally important. The first weakness of Northern Meng's heavy cavalry was that both the men and their horses were covered in heavy armor. Therefore, it was not a bad choice to use light cavalry to attack the camp at night. Even if they could not kill the heavy cavalry, they could still cause a lot of trouble for them. The other weakness of the heavy cavalry was their speed. Although the horses of Great Xia were not as fast as those of Northern Meng, the speed of the light cavalry was much faster than the heavy cavalry. They could make use of this point to drag down the heavy cavalry of Northern Meng. Of course, the prerequisite of this plan was to separate the heavy cavalry from the light cavalry. Using both the real and the fake was the best method. Great Xia's god-arm crossbows were also an important support. Regardless of whether or not they could break through armor, they would cause a lot of damage to the Northern Meng heavy cavalry. The heavy cavalry also had a fatal weakness, which was that once the soldiers fell off their horses, it would not be easy for them to get back on their horses. In a battle between cavalry, once one fell off their horse, it meant death. Furthermore, after the Northern Meng heavy cavalry were shot at, it would be hard for them to quickly retaliate. They had to maintain a tight formation and push forward. Otherwise, they would not be able to use their advantage to kill. The Great Xia cavalry only needed to attack repeatedly. Once the Northern Meng heavy cavalry attacked, they would immediately split up and regroup. As the gap between the cavalry of Great Xia was large and they were far apart, they did not need to be too tight. It was easy for them to regroup once they were far away from the Northern Meng heavy cavalry. Such a charge could continue indefinitely. The Northern Meng heavy cavalry could not endure such a battle. Once the Northern Meng formation was messed up and their morale was shaken, it would be their chance. Xia Zi looked at the charging and retreating Great Xia cavalry with a cold expression. He believed that this time, victory would belong to Great Xia. On the battlefield, the repeated charges of the Great Xia cavalry had already caused the Northern Meng heavy cavalry to suffer casualties. The heavy armor could not cover every part of the Northern Meng heavy cavalry, and there would always be gaps. Whether or not one could survive a battle depended on luck. Some of the Northern Meng heavy cavalry did not have such luck, and the arrows from the crossbows pierced through their eyes and killed them. As for the other Northern Meng heavy cavalry, even if they were not injured by the arrows, the repeated shots caused their blood to boil, making them feel extremely uncomfortable. Exhaustion was slowly revealed in this highly tense battle. The Northern Meng heavy cavalry, who had not had a good rest because of Great Xia, started to feel their stamina run out. Their morale was also becoming more and more unstable. As more and more people fell off their horses, a huge flaw appeared in the Northern Meng heavy cavalry formation. Charge! The Great Xia heavy cavalry, who had been waiting for a chance, charged at the flaw of the Northern Meng heavy cavalry without any regard for their lives. They did not hesitate to pay the price of their lives to break through the unbreakable formation of Northern Meng. The Great Xia light cavalry swiftly gathered together, using their high speed to pull the ropes and drag the exhausted Northern Meng heavy cavalry off their horses one by one. In the next moment, the slaughter began. The dismounted Northern Meng heavy cavalry found it difficult to move. Some were trampled by the panicked war horses, unable to get up. Some were smashed to death by the combined blunt weapons of the great Xia cavalry. There were also some who were tied up by the great Xia heavy cavalry and knocked to their deaths, dragging them hundreds of feet away. The cruelty of war was fully revealed at this moment. On the battlefield, no one was merciful, and it was either you die or I live. Xia Zi's autumn water was stained with fresh blood, dripping onto the ground below. Great Xia's Hawu king, who was filled with killing intent, was not weaker than any of the geniuses. The autumn water glistened, and it was unstoppable. Its killing intent shocked everyone. Qing Wuyo had died in battle, and the 4 generals had also died under the autumn water sword. The order to retreat was not given out in the end. Half a day later, the invincible Northern Meng heavy cavalry was completely wiped out. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.